joined the meeting.
It's 6:30. This is the Norwich Select Board meeting for December 3rd, 2020. And as chair of the Norwich Select Board, I find that due to the state of emergency declared by Governor Scott as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic and pursuant to Addendum 6 of the Executive Order 01-20 and Act 92, this public body is authorized to meet electronically. In accordance with Act 92, there is no physical location to observe and listen contemporaneously to this meeting. However, in accordance with the temporary amendments to the open meeting law, I confirm that we are providing the public access through the Zoom format. Public will be allowed to speak. And Roger will share how to do that. And that if we have any votes tonight, they will be all roll call votes. And I do confirm that I am Claudette Brochu, the chair, joined by Mary Layton, Select Board member, Rob Gear, Select Board member, Roger Arnold, Select Board member, and John Langus, Select Board member, our town manager, Herb Durfee, his administrative assistant, Miranda Bergmeyer, and various members of the public. I know there was some access issue last night with one individual. I don't know if that individual is here tonight or if he is continuing to have access issues. If so, hopefully that individual or any individual will call the number that's provided and we'll try to fix it. So Roger, your little 2 cents worth.
Oh, yes. So if you would like to make a public comment and you're participating via the Zoom platform, please go to participants on the bottom of your screen, and then there'll be an option for you to raise your hand. It will alert me, and I will tell the chair, who will ask that you state your name and locatable address and invite you to speak. If you're participating by phone, please press *9 to raise your hand, and then *6 will unmute yourself to make your public comment once recognized.
Okay, so having that, the first item on our agenda is approval of the agenda. Any changes that any board member wants to make to the agenda? Seeing none, we'll move on then to public or select board comments. Any members of the public wanting to make a comment on issues not on the agenda? There will be time for the public to comment on items on the agenda. Any public comments? I'm seeing a head shake from Rogers, so that's implying no. So we'll move then on into the body of our agenda, which is the continuation of the department budgets. And first up is the fire department. So Chief Northern, you are on the hot seat.
Oh, is it hot?
It's not hot at my house, but
thank you, Claudette, and thank you, everybody. I appreciate the opportunity to come and have a conversation with you about the Norwich Fire Department's budget. I think the budget looks to balance the request of the town manager and the select board for fiscal restraint, balanced with our forward-looking strategy of maintaining the current excellent level of service to the town and the citizenry of Norwich. Let me just go over a couple of things in the operational budget. Some increases, modest increases. We have a modest increase in the fire truck repair and maintenance line item, which is reflective of our aging fleet and the reality that it's taking more to maintain our fleet than it has in the past. So that's where you see that modest increase. You'll also notice an increase in office supplies, and that's due to the fact that we inherited the police department's copier. And so there's a contract that goes along with the copier, as well as, of course, paper. So that is included in that number that you see under office supplies. Then, of course, there is the huge jump that the town manager touched upon last night in the hydrant rental fee. Don't really know what to say about that. That's, I guess we just have to absorb it. And so the meat and potatoes of my discussion with you this evening really has to do with our designated funds. And if you'll indulge me, I'd like to share my screen with you and pull up a couple of shots. Okay, can everybody see that okay?
Yes, I can.
Yes? Okay. So, I do want to have a conversation with you about our designated funds. I think that, Roger, I'm going to preempt your question to me when I'm done about if I had the world, what would I want? And I think at this point, my wish would be that the select board would return to funding the fire department's two designated funds, both apparatus and equipment, to FY18 and FY19 levels. I feel a little bit like the fire department has kind of taken it on the chin a little bit in the last couple of years, in that we've had our designated fund kind of appropriations cut to a great deal. And so I wanted to have a conversation with you about that this evening. And I'd like to start off with talking about the equipment designated fund. As some of you may know, the fire department is a pretty equipment-rich department. Not only do we have apparatus, but we carry a lot of equipment that we need to effectively do the job that we are called upon to do. Thanks to my deputy, you have something called Norwich Fire Department Equipment Inventory Exhibit A that I submitted. That's a list of all of our non-capital equipment that we carry. And the reason that we wanted to share this with you is because the equipment that we have can break at any time. And we have lots of our inventory that lasts for years, but we have to plan for the eventuality that it may break. And I can give you an example. Some of it is not cheap. One of the examples I'll give you is that our SCBA compressor, that's an air compressor that fills our air tanks after we use them at a fire. And that alone, if that were to break tomorrow, would cost us $14,500 to replace. You also have on the screen, on the left side, planned equipment replacement. Those are some of the bigger ticket items that are in our equipment inventory, but also are part of our capital replacement schedule. So the reason that we are asking for $30,000 to be placed into our equipment designated fund for FY22 is that we have to plan for the eventual breakdown of some of the equipment in Exhibit A, but also we've given a graphic example, and I want to especially thank my deputy, Matt Sweat, for doing this spreadsheet and having this available to you for tonight. We have to plan for that eventuality. And so that's why I'm really hoping that when you deliberate and you think about the fire department and its mission and the kinds of equipment that we need to not only keep at the ready, but be able to replace if it breaks, the importance of kind of reinvigorating the equipment apparatus fund is quite important. The next screen I want to share with you is our apparatus replacement schedule. The Norwich Fire Department has really a proud tradition in many ways of planning its apparatus acquisition over the years. I know that we've had a capital plan for acquiring apparatus since roughly 1997, obviously way before the time I got here. And I do want to acknowledge that Chief Fulton is here. I'm not sure if Chief Fulton was here in 97, but he certainly had a hand in this replacement schedule. Again, if you look at the line item under designated fund apparatus, we're asking for $70,000 to be put in there this year. So
Chief, sorry to interrupt, but yes. I'm not seeing your apparatus fund screen.
Okay.
We're looking at the document.
Yeah, I think you maybe just need to scroll down.
No, hold on. It says
We're looking at the equipment designated fund.
Okay, hold on a minute. Let me reshare it.
Sure.
How about now?
Yep.
All set?
Mhm.
Yes.
Okay. So, so here you have our replacement schedule, and you'll see that, you know, we've got some pretty big expenditures coming down the road. I do want to talk to you after we discuss the designated funds. I do want to discuss with you the purchase of a replacement for engine 2. But here you graphically see that, you know, this is what we're looking at down the road. One of the things that having a concrete replacement schedule has done for us is we have not had to bond any of our fire apparatus. We've had the money in the bank, if you will, to be able to pay for a piece of apparatus to spare the town having to bond or to find other ways to come up with the money to replace our apparatus. So, you know, I simply ask that when you deliberate about our designated funds, both equipment and apparatus, that you keep in mind that we are going down that road where if we do not have adequate money replacing the both funds, but in this at this moment specifically the apparatus fund, that we're not going to have that cash on hand to be able to buy it without incurring debt and bonding and all the things that that can be detrimental to a town's fiscal health. So with that said, I do want to have a conversation about the new engine, and obviously I'm happy to entertain any questions about that. I do have Chief Fulton on standby, who has a wealth of institutional knowledge and history that I simply do not have. However, with that said, what we're looking for this evening is for the Select Board's approval to go to the RFP process, request for purchase process, with the apparatus vendors that we have chosen as the ones who are most fit to compete, if you will, for our new piece of apparatus. I have submitted to you a needs assessment that really talks a lot about the need for the engine. We are bound by a standard, the NFPA National Fire Protection Association Standard 1901, which is a national standard that dictates when apparatus should be replaced. And under 1901, generally anything over 15 years is starting to become a danger to the fire department and the folks who have to ride in it for various reasons. Our engine 2 was purchased back in 1999. So, you know, it's 21 years old now. So we're well within that, well, I guess we've well exceeded, if you want, if you will, that limit that the NFPA standard sets for aging fire apparatus. So engine 2 is due to be replaced. It's increasingly difficult to maintain because it is old and it's breaking down a lot. There are lots of safety features that new apparatus has that engine 2 doesn't, just because of its age. I think it served the town very well. It's 21 years old, and we're getting to the point where it's becoming a bit of a liability. There are aspects of that piece of apparatus that really aren't suitable anymore for the kind of work that we do for the town. And so for those reasons, it's really time to think about replacing it. If you'll notice on the apparatus designated fund schedule that I have on the screen, we're looking to replace that in FY22, keeping in mind that when you order a piece of apparatus now, it's about a year to a year and a half before the piece of apparatus is delivered and before payment is due. So what we're doing is we're being planful about this, coming to you now so that we do have that the time to have a conversation, but also to get the ball rolling, to order the piece of apparatus so that you know, we can have that replacement as part of our fleet. With that said, are there any questions that I can answer?
questions from the board?
I guess I have a broad question, if that's okay.
Sure.
Sure.
So I think one of the, I think philosophically, one of the questions that someone could ask is, well, for a town of our size and our fire needs, are 2 engine trucks, a tanker, and a ladder something that our town requires? So I think, so can you, and I'm not necessarily putting that as my personal like cynicism forward, but how would you address that kind of comment when someone suggests something like that, where,
Well,
you know, look, we're taking on too many assets for this fire department in a small town that has limited needs?
sure, and I appreciate that, Roger, and I certainly would answer that. You know, we've had this amount of fire apparatus for years now. You know, this is not anything that is new. Engine 2 is to be replaced, not purchased anew to add to the fleet. So we've had this amount of fire apparatus, and it's very closely tied to our ISO rating, right? The Insurance Service Organization rating for the town, which greatly affects the tax rate, et cetera. So from that standpoint, we've had this amount of apparatus. From a kind of fiscal standpoint, you know, it's what our fire schedule is based on with ISO. So that's one piece of the pie. The other piece is operational, and you know, it happens frequently that you know, we have a call for more than what. Let me phrase it this way. There are potentials for there to be multiple needs for apparatus at one time. Whether that is if we are at a mutual aid fire and Norwich has a need, we have an engine to cover the town when our other engine's out. We are really blessed to have a ladder truck here, which is a much safer operating platform for us and our firefighters when we have chimney fires, structural fires, anything that you require a ladder for, you know, we have, and we're lucky to have that. There are lots of towns around that don't have that. And so, you know, when I look at our fleet, I think our fleet is really, for what the town is, for how much valuable property we have in our town, it's really just about right. It's just about right, Roger. Our tanker is vital because lots of our town is not in a hydro district. So we need that extra water when we have fires to what we call water on wheels, to provide, you know, that extra 2,500 gallons of water to a rural fire scenario. So I guess my point is that we have about the right amount of apparatus for the mission that the Norwich Fire Department is asked to do.
Great. Mary has her hand up, but I wondered, I had one follow-up, but Mary may ask a question first if Claudette.
Go ahead, Mary.
Okay, I just wondered about the difference in value, and this is just I suppose, some technical answer from you, but the difference in value between the ladder truck and a tanker truck, there seems to be quite a difference in value. Could you just explain that, please?
Are you talking about the financial value, Mary, or are you talking about the value to the firefighting mission?
No, not to the mission, but just that engines seem to be, you know, at least $100,000 more than the ladder.
Well, we've always purchased used ladder trucks, and so that's a reflection of the cost of used ladder trucks. The engines that we buy and the tankers that we buy are new. So that's I think that speaks to your question.
Okay, on the engine replacement out in fiscal year 30, which is way out there.
Yeah.
You've got quite a bit of value added. So that must be an estimate. I'm just wondering how you.
Are you talking about, Mary, are you talking about engine 1?
Engine 1, yes.
Yeah. Well, you know, as everything in life goes, things get more expensive, not cheaper. And
Exactly.
so in FY30, that is the projected cost of the engine that we would pay $550,000 for in FY22.
Okay, and then on the ladder, it's a used one, but that's still 2026. So somehow you have to figure between used and also that ladder truck's a new ladder truck that became used would have a greater value when you started. So it's just interesting to me. Are there more parts on the engine? For instance, they're more pump intensive or something like that as well? Like they're more complicated or they have more parts that wear out than a ladder?
Well, I'm not quite understanding your question.
Okay, well, I'll let it go then. Maybe
Well, I
didn't
mean,
see it correctly.
so, engines and ladder trucks have different roles on the fireground,
Right,
right? And so it's hard to kind of compare. It's like an apple and a grape, right? They're two different
apple
things.
and onion, yeah,
They're both fruit, but they're two different things. And so it's hard to say. I'm having trouble kind of drilling
yeah,
down, narrowing
comparing.
down to what you're asking.
So with the ladder truck, the extension of the ladder, of course, is sort of the obvious thing, but it must also have pumps. I mean, you have said in the past, it's a pretty versatile type of truck.
Well, our ladder is known as something called a quint because it has 5 rolls kind of sandwiched into one piece of apparatus. It does have a pump, it has a water tank, it has an area ladder, it has ground ladders, and it has a tack hose. That's
And
what that's
yeah,
that's what's
and I'm
known as a
assuming
quint.
you'd go for something like that again in 2026 if you could.
Well, I think so because
Ladder.
our ladder truck and that quint designation has a lot to do with our ISO rating.
Okay,
And so I think we probably would go for a quint again, a used one, but probably a quint again. Yes.
okay, thank you. That's all I wanted to ask.
Okay.
Yep.
Your follow-up, Roger?
Yes, and then just so you know, Claudette, then it's Rob Gear, and then Neil Fulton, and then Matt Sweat and Doug Wilberdine. So I'll remind you, but there's people on deck. So my follow-up is just I'm very curious about this ISO rating because it's been talked about, on several occasions, and so I tried to look for the PPC report, the Public Protection Classification, which is a report that protects this ISO rating. And so there are 266 fired, as you know, but I mentioned for the benefit of our discussion that there are 266 departments and only 29 fire departments have ratings that are the same or higher. There's only like 8 that have a higher rating than we are. We are, I think, classification 2. Is that right?
Are you speaking about the state of Vermont now?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So we're class 4, I believe. And then there's like maybe 8 that are class 3. You correct me if I'm wrong, but the point is the majority, there's a whole bunch in class 6 and the overwhelming majority is in class 9. And so the fire departments in our state look very different than ours. And, you have talked in the past about your commitment to training there and the conversation that we're having now, the apparatus that we have on hand to be able to secure that ISO rating. But, it's the same philosophical question where if you have 266 departments in, the state of Vermont and we're under this elite crew, and the other elite crew is other municipalities that don't look like ours, what is our commitment to funding and looking like that? And I think what you have referenced is like, well, it's, we've been on this trajectory for a long time. And if you want to change that trajectory, that is a different conversation. That is a community-wide conversation. But I do want to call that out, that we are funding something very unique. And
I'm sorry, very unique, you said?
Yes. And, it speaks to whatever our value systems are. And I think yes, we've been committed to this apparatus in the past, but we're about to recommit, looks like at least 2 instances in the next few years, $500,000. So, so I don't know. I don't have an analysis of that, but that's what I want to offer to my colleagues a little bit. That, this is.
I'm not quite sure, Roger, what you're getting at. Should we not have? Are you of the opinion that we should not have the fleet that we do? Or,
I think it just goes back to that original sort of rhetorical question that I asked, where like that would be, you know, for our needs, like, do we need this sort of elite crew when the majority, this ISO rating for the majority of our communities is like a classification that is like so different than ours.
right,
So, you know, I think as we continue to talk about an apparatus, I think we want to be committed to that standard because it speaks to the values of our community for lots of reasons. But I think we maybe need in the future years to have like more creative conversations around maybe mutual aid networks and mutual sharing. I know that the idea is that if they're all being used at once, sharing does very little. But I think we need to maybe continue to think in that way. Like there's got to be other ways to be committed to that standard while, you know, these are, so I don't know. I don't necessarily, okay, so I'm going to step back. I think the point has been made and I've introduced the data about the ISO ratings a little bit, and now other folks can speak to that as they will. So thank
I'm
you.
gonna go to Rob first, John, and then we'll come to you before we go to anybody else. So Rob, go ahead.
Yeah, am I coming through audio?
You are.
Okay, good. Question I have is, we have these 2 engines, a tanker and a ladder utility. Are we staffed well enough to man all those pieces of equipment now simultaneously?
Robert, are you talking about at one time or when
time.
they're needed?
At one time.
At one time? Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Okay. Just considering the
That's
recommendation.
very rare, by the way.
Yeah, I understand.
Yeah.
But you're saying the benefit of having 2 engines is in case one's needed for mutual aid and something breaks out in town. It doesn't do any good if we don't have anybody to adequately man it.
Right.
Okay, that is all.
John?
Thanks, Chief. So, you know, this is one where I don't actually have a ton of heartburn about. I think that, you know, and I didn't make this point yesterday. I thought that we'd just sort of wait until we got to the meeting where we're sort of all making our cases. But I do feel like I want to make the point that, you know, we should keep in mind that the decisions that were made over the last 3 years were not sort of accidental, right? So we very consciously asked departments to make sacrifices because of an event that happened. That event cost us $550,000, more or less, right? After all of the aid from the state and the feds kicked in, our town still paid $500,000 for that one storm, right? So that was on purpose, that we cut people short for a couple of years, and that is now behind us. We managed that, and those dollars balance themselves out. We're in a strong position again, so I think it's appropriate that now we can, you know, go back to the revert to the mean, right? I think with this, you know, I think I'm certainly not an expert in the interplay between this sort of force and the insurance market, but I do know that we have a very spread out town, right? We have a lot of acreage that we cover here. It's a unique thing about the way that towns are set up in Vermont. And there's a tremendous amount of real estate value spread across that acreage. You know, we're looking here at the ask. So if we gave you everything that you asked for here, we'd be looking at about an average of about $100,000 a year in capital budget appropriations per year in current, you know, dollars. And that works out to about $30 a head in our town. So, you know, when you look at your homeowner's insurance, right? You know, and you think about, okay, this is what I pay for my homeowner's insurance. Do I think that it's valuable to add $30 to that per head? So maybe $150 if you're a family of 4. Do I think that that's a worthy expenditure to add some protection to, what for almost all of us is our single biggest investment in our lives, is our home, not to mention the lives of our family. So, like I said, it's, there's always trade-offs in budget season. I don't personally, though, gasp at these numbers. I agree that we asked you to sort of, take a seat, take a knee for a couple of years. And so, yeah, I think I'm going to be broadly supportive of this, and maybe even supportive of having the appropriation for this year be a little bit higher. And you're trying to sort of ease us into it. But yeah, I appreciate the presentation. That's sort of my view on this one.
Thank you, John.
Roger, who was, you said, Neil,
Fulton,
Matt,
and then Matt, and then Doug.
Okay, go ahead, Neil. Name and locatable address, please.
Neil Fulton at 262 Hawk Pine Road. Can you hear me?
Barely. If you can talk a little bit louder.
I will talk louder. In answer to Alex's question, I joined the fire department in 1995. I was on the select board in 1997 when we asked the three equipment-rich departments, Public Works, Police, and Fire, to put together a capital plan for the replacement of Public Works equipment, the vehicles in the police department, the apparatus, and the fire department. And so that's when we started that, and that is a request of the select board. That was pre-town manager. In 1999, we went through a field inspection where we had to run evolutions for them by the Insurance Service Office. And in answer to Roger's question, before 1999, the Norwich public protection classification was split. Within the hydrant district, it was a class 5. Within 5 miles of the fire station, road miles, and outside the hydrant district, it was a 9. And that's why most towns in Vermont have a class 9. They don't have a good rural water supply program. One of the things we did in the 90s is we started to invest with grants in dry hydrants. And we went through an engineering study to take and rate all of our ponds and the hydrants, because for the rural water supply to satisfy the requirements of the ISO based upon NFPA standards, you have to demonstrate that the water is available in a certain drought condition. So we went through that process. And coming out of 1999, in that public protection classification, we went from a 5, 9, 10 outside of the 5 road miles, which essentially they consider unprotected, to a 410. And that wasn't based upon the amount of engines we had. That was based upon a real effort by the members at that time and those that have come after us to develop a system where we could deliver sufficient water for 2 hours in the rural area. We were the first department in Vermont to receive that for rural water. After that, a number of departments, especially in our area, have done that. To back up a little bit, in 1995, there were 4 pumping engines on the fire department: engine 1, engine 2, engine 3, and engine 4. By the time we got to 2005, which is when engine 1 was delivered, we had gone through a planning process to determine the appropriate equipment for the department. The ladder truck was first purchased in 1980. It was a used ladder from Hanover. And then it was replaced in 1995 with another used truck because on the annual inspection of the aerial failed. So we bought one that had been in Long Meadows and had been through a fire in a mill which burned up one side of the rig. And then that was replaced in, I think it was 2009. As we put together the plan and came up with a capital replacement plan in 2005, it was based upon 2 engines, a ladder truck, and a tanker, even though we had 3 engines at that time: engine 1, engine 2, and engine 3. The plan was to replace engine 3 by buying a Quint, which, as Alex mentioned, was both a pumper and an aerial. And so that's how we got from 4 engines to 2 over, I think it took probably 15 years to accomplish that. A new ladder truck today would cost $1 million to $1.2 million. There are plenty of good used trucks out there that have seen service in a city where they run hard, but they're younger, that would be quite suitable for Norwich. So, yeah, we received a PPC of 4. I know the members at that time, and I think the members now are pretty pleased with that, because it really came at no additional cost, because we already had the equipment. It came through training and the development of a rural water supply plan. We did an evaluation at that point in time, and the savings to the town of going from a class 9 to a class 4 in the rural area and a 5 to a 4 in the hydrant area exceeded $200,000 a year. And the 4 is as much as we wanted to do, because in homeowners insurance, for example, insurance companies tend to bracket things. So for a homeowners policy, 1 to 4 pays about the same rate. Of course, there are other things involved in that rate other than the classification, the type of construction, whether you have a fire alarm system, the home sprinklers, and things like that. So that's what got us to where we were in 2005 and to where we are now. I ran a calculation, for example, when there was discussion of not having a ladder truck. If we didn't have a ladder truck, then, and it's not the aerial that's critical. As Alex mentioned, the ladder carries an awful lot of other equipment, ground ladders being one of them. Our public protection classification would drop from 4 to 5. That, talking to my insurance company, that would cost me $43 a year. So the trade-off between buying equipment and homeowners insurance is direct. You know, if we don't maintain a 4, we're going to see a general increase in homeowners insurance costs. My house is below the median of houses in Norwich. So if you take that 43 and multiply it by the 1,300 R1 and R2 properties, that's about $56,000 a year in additional homeowners insurance costs that people pay if they're insured to about 80% of their value. So I think that's pretty critical. The other thing is, just to go back a moment, on the equipment sheet that Alex shared with you, and Matt, who I guess is next in line, can speak to this more than I can, but these SCBA cylinders have a finite life under DOT and OSHA regulations, so they cannot be used after a certain period of time, and I think it's 15 years. So there are some non-discretionary things that are involved. If you look at the $550,000 that Alex has estimated for the cost of the pumper to replace engine 1, a neighboring department recently bought a pumper. It's pretty nice. It cost $690,000. So I think what Alex and Matt are doing is they're working hard to get a piece of apparatus that provides the functionality that Norwich needs, but doesn't have all the bells and whistles that other departments are buying. So that's just sort of some background that to try to bring you up to where we are today.
Matt?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yep.
Great. Matt Sweat, 34 Old Orchard Lane, Norwich. It's hard to follow Neil because I was going to say a bunch of the things that he helped to clarify. The basics are just that, you know, it's a great question to ask, is the current number of apparatus and type of apparatus what we need as a town. And as you can tell from listening to Neil and the chief, you know, we're that's our duty to constantly evaluate that and make sure that we can run the pieces that they benefit the town. And in this instance, you know, how they affect the ISO rating. They actually, you know, they don't exactly pay for themselves, but they certainly are worth having the group of apparatus that we have now. One thing I'd like to say is that I was glad to hear John say that he was fairly comfortable with trying to return to pre-weather event contributions to our designated funds, because that was, I remember that select board meeting when we were talking about budgets, and that was a tough one, because I knew that coming up, we had to replace a bunch of air cylinders and air packs. And I also knew that we had sort of trucks that really needed to be replaced. And so we did, as a department, as all the departments did, kind of step up and take and not take designated fund distributions the past couple of years, and we pushed off getting certain things, but we're at the point where we're beyond a reasonable time frame for having to replace air packs and air bottles, and you know, even if we're a year and a half out from getting a new engine, we're at the end of these life cycles. And so I appreciate you know, John remembering that we had that conversation I think it was 2 years ago at these budget hearings, and hopefully we can get, you know, back on track, because I do believe that these things are worth it, both for keeping our members safe, keeping the members of the town safe, and being able to do our jobs. Thanks.
And I think Doug is next.
Okay, thank you. Doug Wilberding, 1329 Turnpike Road. Alex and Matt and your team, thanks very much for everything that you guys do. I just note a couple things. One, the property values in town are nearly $1 billion, just for people to have perspective on the values of the homes that you guys are protecting. So I thank you for everything that you're doing. I think replacing equipment is critical to your function and your job. The one thing I'd ask is if you'd considered a B100 biofuel fire truck. Boulder, Colorado has used them for about 10 years. The price is about the same. And just in keeping with our climate change directives, Article 36, especially trying to reduce impact and CO2 emissions, and transportation is the leading cause. I'm not sure what your miles are every year, but if there's a way for us to get a green fire truck in Norwich within your budget, the fire truck that Boulder obtained was $510,000. And so it's kind of in line with your plan. I just think that would be a good thing to do, and it would be keeping with our mission and what we're trying to achieve, but also getting you fresh equipment that is also good for the climate.
Claudette, can I respond to Doug?
Sure.
Thank you, Doug. Appreciate that. And I also want to give a nod to John that we really have been thinking very hard about green apparatus. You know, the fire service is still evolving. It's the technology for hybrids and the like. You know, right now, an engine that really would benefit Norwich most, and we do have certain idiosyncratic needs that for apparatus because of our terrain, especially here in the town of Norwich. You know, we're still looking at a piece of apparatus, a hybrid apparatus that is in the millions of dollars. It's come down in price. Initially, Rosenbauer had one out for I think $6 million. Now I think they are still making the attempts at those, but they've come down to about $2 million. And I think Neil might have the finer points about the cost. They are coming down, but it's still quite cost prohibitive for us to even really think about getting an engine that is going to meet kind of our green outlook. We are going to, John, especially for you for this, we are going with batteries now, rather than a lot of the tools and appliances that used to work on gas-powered engines. So we are really making concerted effort as we can to take the green initiative of the town seriously and to fit our planning into that as well. It's just taking some time for the technology to keep up with what we would like to do.
I would just, I appreciate that. I would just comment that the B100, the biodiesel, is different than an electric engine. So if you want some of the research or if you want the information for the Boulder department, I'm happy to provide it. But
yeah, I would love that, Doug. If you could send that to me, however, I'd appreciate that.
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate it. Thanks.
Thank you.
Any other questions? I have a couple of questions. Alex, can you put back up, not the apparatus, the first slide?
The equipment?
Yes, please.
Can you see it?
Not yet.
Okay, you know what? I didn't share the screen. Sorry. Hmm. Sorry, Claudette. Let me trying to get it up here for you.
That's okay. You can, I think there was the request there was for, here we go.
Is that it? Yes, it is.
18 SCBA units.
Yes, yes, the package, right? The top line.
Yep.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And how many active firefighters do you have currently?
At this point, 17.
Okay. And the fire PPE, 30 units.
Uh-huh.
What, oh, okay, I see jacket, pants. If you have 17, why do you need 30 units? 17
Well-
members.
Well, these are being replaced over time. So, you know, we have people who join the department who leave. So, we're scheduling out to replace what we have now. And what we have now also serves as backup gear. So for instance, when we have a fire, we can have, because of the cancer risk, we can have a second set of gear that is available, and that's the old gear. So what we do is the new gear gets saved, the old gear gets put away. Then when that new gear gets dirty, full of carcinogens, we have a second set of gear, which is what we're working towards. We have a second set of gear to replace that. So it's a health issue.
Okay, that, and then you can stop the share if you like. Couple, is there a trade-in value for that tanker?
Well, we're not looking to get rid of the tanker.
Not the tanker, sorry, the engine. The engine
Yeah,
that
it's gonna be quite minimal. You know, it's a 1991 piece of apparatus. There's a glut of apparatus out there now, so we're not looking to recoup a whole lot of money from that.
do you have an estimate? Even if
I would say, you know,
less.
if we get between 7 and 10 grand for it, we're doing well.
Okay, and then wondering if there are grant opportunities for the air packs
I'm sorry, what opportunities?
grant.
There are, and I continue to apply for those. The problem with Norwich is that, especially with the what's called an AFG grant, Assistance to Firefighter Grant, which is run through FEMA, we have our call volume is compared to others, and so rural America has a hard time getting money out of FEMA.
Okay. And then this is probably more of a question for Neil, and it gets back to the ISO rating piece. How do you know that our ISO would drop if we got rid of one of the trucks?
Well,
Because with the increase in the dry hydrants.
yeah, I guess I'll have to
You
give
said yourself
you
it
some,
wasn't linked to equipment.
yeah, I can give you some background on that. My degree from Illinois Institute of Technology was fire protection engineering. I went to school with a bunch of people that were on full scholarships from what was then the National Board of Fire Underwriters, which is now the Insurance Service Office. So we were all being trained in how to apply what is called the rating schedule. So I have a program that I still have where I can take and make adjustments in the apparatus match and see what the results would be. And so, for example, for Norwich, with our population and what they call fire flow, each of the commercial buildings in town, they've come out and inspected them and come up with a needed fire flow. We need to have 2 pumpers and with a pumping capacity of a minimum of 2,000 gallons of water per minute. So that takes 2 engines. So if we dropped an engine, I haven't run that because I didn't realize that would be discussed. There's no question in my mind, if I plugged that into my program, we would see a drop in class of more than 1 class.
What if we drop the ladder?
we drop the ladder, we would go clearly from a 4 to a 5. And as I mentioned, the increase in my insurance costs would be $43 a year. And the assessed value of my property in my home is less than the average in town.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Any other questions from anyone? I'm not seeing Roger's telling me there are. So thank you, Chief. Thank you, Matt. Thank you, Neil.
Claudette?
Oh, yes.
Yes, so I guess what I'm looking for is a little bit of guidance about the RFP. You know, I guess what I'm looking for is an okay from the select board to go ahead and send the RFP out so that we can start getting bids for the apparatus and get the ball rolling. How do you feel about that tonight?
Not. It wasn't on our agenda. So we don't act on anything that is not on our agenda. And
Okay.
this is strictly a budget discussion meeting.
Okay.
So, and I know I would,
We don't have a motion to act on, but I think, you know, just as John Langus said, he was sympathetic to the cutback in funds. I think we could express, you know, how we feel as, you know, broadly. I think that's fair.
How do you feel, Mary?
No, I feel very similar to John Langus. I actually was concerned when we cut back the designated funds. Didn't see a way around it at the time. But in general, I would like to, you know, get those back up to the point where it's sustainable for this size of department. So I will just say that.
and yeah, and I'm not willing to entertain a motion tonight.
No, I don't think
Yeah.
that's appropriate.
I
I
mean,
agree with you.
and I don't, you know, I just to be clear, like I'm happy to ask those questions, but you know, generally as an individual, I'm supportive of this. I mean, I'm a little cynical about talking about public money to protect our really high private property to preserve an insurance rating. Like that makes me a little sad, and I'm sure there are other approaches to talk about the great work and the needs of your department. But I appreciate that this is a budget conversation, so you talk about these budget factors. So yeah, so despite maybe the tone of my questions, I do generally support it. So just to be clear, but anyway, no motion. So.
And Alex, just to let you know, it won't come up on the December 9th agenda either. So, because that agenda is pretty much set unless, so at least in, yeah.
Okay, well, I appreciate what you've been able to share with us tonight, and we'll definitely put it on the agenda for the next time we can find room, if that works with you.
We'll see. You know, I guess part of my whole, we're in the middle of a budget discussion and designated funds and capital equipment requests and all of this. And until we get to the end of it, I would think it would be premature.
Yeah, no, I hear what you're saying. I just want to make sure to signal that we'd like to put it on the agenda the next time we're able to.
Okay.
Right? So I guess that may be in the latter part of December.
Probably I would say earlier January would be more realistic.
Okay. I appreciate that.
So Matt Sweat has his hand up, Claudette.
Go ahead, Matt.
Hi. I hope this isn't inappropriate to bring up, but being part of the history of purchasing other trucks, we've never in the past, the fire department has never in the past needed to get a select board approval just to send out a request for bid. And only because that request for bid just gets us more information. It doesn't actually commit us to doing anything. And with that more information, you know, we would then obviously in the past that we would then come to the select board and say, this is all the due diligence that we have done. You know, we've assembled a committee to look at what we need in a truck. We've assembled our needs and wants. We've sent out the request for bid packet. These are the bids that we have gotten. And at that point, the fire department has historically come to the select board and said, you know, this is all the information. And out of respect for your time, you know, we've assembled it all so that you can now, you know, put you know, due diligence into figuring out, you know, where our next path, like where we go from there. So you don't have to let us know. I mean, obviously we would want, if you want to, that's totally fine. But it seems like it creates a process that's multi-stepped for you, where that might not be, you know, it's not necessary for you. But I'm just letting you know out of history, and so if it would be easier, you know, I do think that like right now is not a good time to debate whether we send out an RFB when we're talking about budget.
John, you had a point?
Yeah, I was thinking the exact same thing. You know, that this trend towards, you know, jumping in at the pre-decision making stage is not the role of a board that's job is to give oversight. I would absolutely encourage you to go out and do this. You know, as long as you've got Herb's blessing and get your information lined up, and then by the time you've got that lined up, it will be a point in early January when we've got plenty of time to consider an actual proposal on the agenda and we can act on it, rather than just giving you the ability to then start thinking about it. I would fully support your independent authority to be able to do that without us having to approve that.
Process, right?
So yeah, I mean, you raised good points. So, and I bet you'll probably confer with Herb and see what needs to be done. So. All right.
So then I just want to be clear for the record that it's going to be okay for us to go out and get those bids and then come back and discuss them with you.
If that's the path that you and Herb agree on, then that's the path. I mean, you raised some really good points. It does seem a little bit odd to.
I think can I provide a quick summary of why there's like maybe a difference of like a opinion on this?
Sure.
So my understanding is that, you know, Herb has mentioned to us before, like this is a known expenditure. The department tonight has talked even about a larger history of why this should be familiar to us. It was in what Herb calls his first generation capital budgeting program last time. I think Claudette's, the tension that you may be detecting is that document didn't give the kind of consideration that we would have wanted to in our last budget cycle. And so while it is very much known to the distinguished folks on my Zoom screen because of their relationship with this town, this board, it is a newer idea to this board. And so that is like the larger context. And so, but I think your point about, well, shouldn't you get more information from an RFP for a planned expense? I think there's a question of like, well, how planned was that expense? And so I know that is probably really shocking as an idea, but I think that's the tension, just to be clear. And it's not, tension might be the wrong word, and correct me if I'm not summarizing it accurately.
I'd say that's good. And I say we could just move on.
Mm-hmm.
So again, thank you, Alex.
Thank you.
Matt.
Thank you.
And Neil.
Thanks, Chief. Thanks, Matt.
Thank you.
Unless, Chief, you're probably here for emergency. Is there, there's the emergency management part of this as well. Is there?
Right.
Anything?
There's nothing really much there for me to comment on. I don't know if Herb wants to jump in, but I don't really see much for me to comment on.
Anything special, Herb?
Just the note of with the issue with regard to the generators. I don't know if Larry's going to touch on that during his presentation, but essentially the designated fund balance for the generators is contained in there. And we are in the process of replacing the one at the public safety building. The one currently at the public safety building will go up to the highway garage. We were able to size that appropriately. And then the next focus is on the Tracy Hall generator. We've been able to cobble together the Tracy Hall generator, hopefully enough to last for about a year. So we need a few extra bucks in that designated fund in order to handle the cost of a Tracy Hall generator. So that's the general attention that I draw you to with the emergency management aspect of things. And then just so you'll know, with the smaller dollars that are in there, we're just gradually trying to build up the supplies for the emergency operations center over in the public safety building. So if something does happen, we'll have the pencils and erasers and pieces of paper and the digital cords that need to hook up computers and stuff as that goes live. So we built the facility, but there still are some basics of supplies that need to go in there. And Chief Frank, Chief Northern, and I continue to work on that.
Okay. Any questions from the board? Any questions from the public on emergency management? Seeing none. Public Works.
Oh, I'm sorry, Neil Fulton had his hand up.
Sorry.
I just saw that.
Go ahead, Neil.
I just had one question for Herb on the tower bond. That was a fairly short-term bond. There was two parts of it. There was a note and a bond. When will they be paid off?
That's coming up shortly. Hold on, let me write in the audit. I want to say maybe 3 more years.
The 3 more years then would be for the bond. The
Right.
note, the note was what, 5 years? So that maybe that's been paid off already.
Yeah, there's one that we did pay off. I'm just trying to figure out which one is which in here, but there's one that's going to be due the end of 24, I think. And then, sorry, I don't have my audit folder in front of me. I have the schedule all spelled out. So I guess what I'll do in reply to that question is I'll get the information, I'll email the information out to the board, which will be in the packet for December 9th. So you can have that. Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions? Seeing none. We will go to Public Works. Larry, you are up. You're muted.
How about now? Can you hear me?
Yep, you could talk a little bit louder though.
Okay, I guess I have to get closer to the microphone. Well, I can make a brief presentation here on maybe some of the.
Your mic's not working now.
I think you might be sitting on the mic or maybe have something in front of it, like a paper.
Can you hear me? No.
No.
Farther away from it.
Good.
That's good, maybe.
Say something again.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
You can hear me now?
Yes.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah.
Can you hear us?
I don't know what happened. What changed?
Oh.
Usually people don't have a problem hearing me. Anyways, I've got a pretty brief presentation. I'm just going to highlight some of the thoughts that maybe on some of the things that may have changed from the past, and maybe a couple other points, but it wouldn't take very long, and then
Chris.
hopefully it helps out.
Join the meeting.
In my view, the director's job is to identify the needs of the department and the infrastructure, not to determine the affordability, but I hope we can achieve a balance between the need and the funding. I typically break down the department into 4 categories. That's manpower, operational budget, equipment, and projects. And so I'll speak in that order. And I just have a few points for each one. In regards to manpower, I've had a lot of residents ask me why the Public Works Department is not completing some of the tasks that they have in the past. And so I'm going to take this opportunity to let the residents and anyone else know that historically the department has hired up to 2 seasonal workers for the last 10 to 20 years. The department has not had those seasonal workers since I've been here. And another significant change, I think, is that the Public Works Department is now charged with the maintenance of the Marion Cross School grounds. So in short, if you put those together, the department cannot necessarily complete all the tasks in the same manner and time as was historically done. I just feel that that's something that needs to be said. In my manpower request, I have asked for the funding of a public works laborer who will work in all the divisions to offset some of the staffing shortages. And as an aside, I'd like to thank the town and the board for supporting the administrative assistance position. It should, however, be a full-time position, given the size and the scope of the work here at the department versus the currently funded 20 hours per week. Going on to the operational budget, I'll just touch on some of the issues that I think maybe you people are looking at. Highway contracted services. I've requested funds for several planning tools for the department. I think they're something that's sorely needed. The road service management survey. This will provide an unbiased condition inventory and priority repair with cost for the paved roads in town. A traffic study, which will provide traffic data for input into the RSMS program. That's the road service management survey. Sidewalk inventory, provide a sidewalk inventory in the current condition with a prioritized repair schedule. And the bridge study and inventory of bridges in town. I've requested that program and that study under projects. Some highlights for the operational budget that you may have already noticed are culverts and road supplies. There's been an increase there because the department has installed much of the culvert inventory and the inventory needs to be resupplied. Contracted services, in addition to the programs defined a few minutes ago under contracted services, I've also requested funds to contract culvert replacement. Those are the deeper ones that require trench box excavation or extensive excavation. Plus we have a number of culverts to address anyways. And also to flush culverts, which are full of sediment, of which we have quite a few in town. Highway garage supplies. The increase here is that I've changed the line item coding. The items that I'm including in this garage supplies now are the garage, public works garage soap, shop rags, and bags that are supplied by the uniform company. They were previously coded to the uniform, but they're not really uniforms. They're part of the operations of the shop. Therefore, I've coded it in the supplies. Highway garage tools. We've asked for an increase in funding to replace some welding and cutting torch accessories and some jack stands. Under solid waste, under contracted services, the food waste law went into effect on July 1st, and the food waste volume has grown significantly at the transfer station. Go on to equipment. If you refer to the capital budget program chart that I think the town manager put out under the Public Works Department, you'll see that I'm requesting to replace a 2010 four-wheel drive dump truck. I just want you to note that for various reasons unknown, I guess, the body of this truck is at least 4 years older than the 2010 age of the truck and chassis. And consequently, it's showing rust holes, and we've actually had to patch some of those with plates and welding. I'm asking for a capital reserve fund of $25,000 to fund the purchase of a used tank truck to replace the current 1981 tank truck, which requires significant expense to become operational. We've had quite a trial with trying to get that on the road, and just seems like it's good money following bad. So I think that if we had a capital reserve fund, probably we could find a cab and chassis for a tank truck that a construction company had got rid of, that we could take the tank off and put the tank on that we have from the 1981 truck. I'm also requesting the purchase of a 72-inch riding mower for the Buildings and Ground Department to replace 2 older mowers. We would trade those mowers in or try to sell them. I would think this new mower would reduce mowing man hours significantly. And then we come to projects. If you refer to the capital budget program, under highways, I'm putting in a request to reclaim and pave a mile of Route 132, starting approximately at Union Village Road intersection, continuing easterly towards Route 5. Under bridges, again, as I referenced before, as promised in last year's budget review meeting, I've requested funding for a townwide bridge/culvert inventory. This would be an all-encompassing document for all drainage structures greater than 5 feet in diameter. The inventory would address current condition, proposed repairs, replacement with costs, and a priority of repair and replacement. To accomplish this, I would have to prepare an RFP to select a qualified engineering firm to perform that scope of work. I think that's pretty essential for the bridge program here in town. Tiger Town box culverts. This is a program that was started before I came here, but we are on course to put these structures out to bid this spring and go under construction this summer for 2 culverts, 2 concrete box culverts on the Tiger Town Road. And the Route 132 box culvert, we're requesting funds for the construction and construction inspection of the replacement of the box culvert on Route 132. Buildings and grounds, I think Herb already touched on a lot of this, but basically the generator program is such that we'd like to replace the generator at Tracy Hall, so you have a reliable backup source of power. We have managed to get the current generator running. However, we know from past history mechanically that the fuel system will need to be rebuilt on a 1 to 2 year basis. So it's time to install a new generator and have some consistent, reliable power. And also, Herb mentioned that we were looking to take the salvaged generator from the public safety building generator project, which is now under construction, salvage that generator and place it at the Public Works Department. It's a propane generator, so we would be burning propane up there in lieu of the diesel fuel that's there now. But we had Brookfield Services look at our loading up there, and they felt that it would probably be adequate for power if not just on its own. We might have to do a little load sharing, but it would probably get the job done. However, you have to be aware that that generator manufacturer is out of business, and you can get parts for another 10 years probably. So then I had some miscellaneous projects. I think it would be worthwhile for the town to construct some storage bins at the Public Works garage, keep our aggregate separated so there's no contamination, you don't lose material. Keep your paving, your crushed stone, your crushed gravel, your bank run, those kind of things separate so you can use it all, instead of like, well, that last 6 inches got mixed in with that bunch over there, and so you've got like a mishmash of stuff. I think it would be worthwhile. It's pretty typical for public works departments. And again, we would continue to try to install the break room appurtenances. We still need to provide cabinetry and sinks and some other, and benches in the Public Works Department. And lastly, I would still like to request a transfer station building, which we would use for multiple purposes. We would process the plastic film when it becomes an issue. We would also probably take the cloth structure down, which really has to be replaced almost every 2 or 3 years, and it rips apart in the wind, and put the Freon gas appliances in there. And we would also process some other things that mysteriously appear at the transfer station and have to be addressed in a legal and appropriate fashion. I think that's about what I thought I would skip through tonight, so that would give you a brief overview of maybe some of the things that have changed in the department, or some of the requests that we're making.
Any board questions?
Mary has her hand up.
Go ahead, Mary.
Yes, Larry, on the 132 box culvert replacement, which is quite expensive, I noticed that there's been a temporary repair of large stone and a, I guess, plastic culvert that's been placed in there. My question is, how temporary is the repair? In other words, could we leave it in place safely so that it would buy us a little time to try to get some grant funding or other funding to make that repair, since it's such a large amount?
Well, I think that's probably best answered by the engineer who actually designed the temporary repair, but I would think that if you didn't extend that into 10 or 20 years, I think that would probably be a possibility. Yeah, if you were looking for a year or two, I would think that he would be comfortable with that. He would probably, Stantec is the engineer. They would probably be more concerned about the likelihood of a real large flood coming through and what those impacts might be. And the longer it's there, you have to address those things. But I don't think that's an unreasonable position or an unreasonable request. And I can certainly ask him if he has a reservation about doing that.
Herb, correct me if I'm wrong. We have already funded that replacement.
Pardon? Funded it?
We've approved funding for that 132 culvert.
No, I think we've approved the funding of the engineering of it.
What we did
We
was
haven't funded the construction.
right. What we shifted, we received a structures grant originally for the Chapel Hill Road area.
And we swapped.
We were able to shift that, which was the scoping aspect of it, shift that to, instead of Chapel Hill, to the Route 132 project. If we went out with construction today without further grant funding, there is an amount of money that currently exists in the designated fund for bridges, but you would basically use up that entire amount to deal with it, which is what we had talked about earlier this fall with regard to the emergency situation that we're in. When we got toward closer to the finishing up the engineering and talking about permitting, the issue that we had is not being able to do any construction during what's called the winter timeframe with the stream alteration permit folks. So that's why we move forward with the temporary solution to get us into next year. That by, I don't know if you call it a stroke of luck, but at least the anticipation is that the structures grant program will fire up again this coming spring, so we could apply for some money from the structures grant. Obviously that's competitive, no guarantee that we would get something, but the hope there might be that we could get some additional funding in order to move toward the construction that wouldn't be just all local stuff. So currently we do have the funds in the bridge fund, but it would deplete it probably entirely.
And I believe I'll have to look back in our minutes. I think that was approved.
Right, it's when we were talking about the emergency related stuff. So I believe that you had that in your discussions, and with the sort of forced situation of having to delay for a little bit, we would still be trying to apply for some funding for grant funding so that we wouldn't have to use all of the designated funds if we didn't have to.
Okay, sorry to interrupt, Mary. Did you have?
No, that was just the stability
Mayor-
of the temporary repair.
Yeah, Mary, I don't have any problem with asking Israel. He's the engineer. Israel Maynard is the engineer for the project.
That'd be
I wouldn't
great.
think that would be a big issue for him to give us a response on that, and I could bring that back and you'd have that information.
Okay, thanks so much.
Other board questions?
I guess I'm always trying to look for analysis, so I hope everyone, forgives my struggles. But my question, Larry, how do I phrase this? So it sounds like the majority of the increases, or what you've been advocating for, is what we might expect: more paving, culverts, and bridges. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, that's pretty much what Public Works handles. Yep.
Well, right, but those are also where we're seeing the biggest increases in these three items.
Well, you're always probably going to be planning for a replacement of some bridge in some fashion. You may not be building a bridge every year or every other year, but you're probably always going to be planning on either engineering one or seeking grant funds or whatever, as long as the town of Norwich exists. That's been my experience. It doesn't seem as though you ever really catch up, because by the time, if you have 10, 15 bridges in town, by the time you catch up with one, at the last one, it's time to start over again. That's those kind of things, it seems, but technology does help with that, and bridges are lasting longer than they used to.
I guess I'm referring to the fact that under,
Pardon?
I'm seeing line items that have substantial increases under that. Are you confirming that, or are you?
Well, I've asked for things like the studies, like I've said, to help us plan in the future for, so that we can choose which roads that we want to work on in the future on a better unbiased basis, but also for you people, the board, to have a better grip on the actual costs of those type of things too. I don't know, as I've asked for a lot of increases. I've asked for increases in things like gravel, which it looks to me like we've funded gravel in this town at $50,000 for the last 5, 6, 7 years. Gravel is increasing in cost, number one, but it's a fact. It's not an opinion that you lose about an inch of gravel off your road per year to dust. Well, you've got 46 miles of road, and I calculated it out. If you tried to replace that 1 inch of material that you lost at current day's prices, you'd have to have $239,000 to do that. And you'd also have to have a lot of labor and a lot of trucks and equipment to do it. But what I'm saying is that even a minimal increase doesn't necessarily, get you there. You still have to keep up with the cost increases and do the best you can in a lot of these issues.
Okay, so I guess my wonder was, I was seeing increase in those three areas, like line 417 in our spreadsheet, culvert and other road supplies is 140% of an increase, for example.
Yeah, well, the reason for that, Roger, is that the town had a very large inventory of culverts. And because of the status of our program, of our culverts, as you well know, the culvert inventory, we've got a lot of culverts that need to be replaced. And so what I did was I made that one of our priorities in the town, and we put in 27 culverts this year. Well, 27 culverts means essentially most of the time it means 54 pieces of culvert, because you're usually putting in 2 pieces of culvert. So we use quite a bit of that inventory up. There's about 30 pieces left. I had an inventory countdown. We got about 30 pieces left. So I'm figuring we probably have most of that done by July 1st of next year. So essentially we could have pretty close to 0 culverts left by fiscal year July 1st.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm
So
just replacing it.
okay. So that's like helpful, like, you know, because you began your presentation sort of talking about a general comment about hearing from the public about a possible decline in the quality of services, but
Yeah.
yet, you know, you're requesting more money, an increase for culverts as evidence of work completed, right? You ran out of culverts and you need more to finish this culvert program. So that's like clear sign of work being completed. And so that's great. But I think what I'm trying to understand is when, you know, we have to increase funds for things like culvert, which is a robust, successful program and being completed, but yet the comment, the public doesn't see culverts, they see sort of these other aspects. And so I want to understand more about that a little bit. So are people not getting the quality of services because we're trying to maintain a culvert program? You know, you said it was just the mowing of Marion Cross. Like,
I think the thrust of my comment was very simple. We're not able to do some of the things that we used to do in the past simply because we don't have the manpower. When we had 2 seasonal workers in the past, and I don't have 2 seasonal workers, I just simply can't do the same amount of work in the same amount of time. One of the things that people notice a lot is, how come you haven't mowed my roadsides? Well, in the past, we used to have a seasonal worker dedicated to mowing roadsides. Well, we don't. So we have to make do with the crew that we have. And so we're forced to try to fit that in and work it as best we can with the manpower we have. That's a simple thing. People are used to seeing their roads being mowed in a certain fashion because there was a body to put out there on a regular basis to mow roadsides, and we don't have that body. So that's why I've asked for a public works label.
Sure. And I guess just to put like a final comment on what I'm trying to like get out of at least my conversation, and please colleagues, tell me if you're not understanding my point, is that, you know, when you have these kinds of increases for these important infrastructure you know, points in this budget with substantial increase, it's really hard to stand up before your community, and that's our job, I get it, but I want you to understand it's hard for us to justify these expenses when people are also seeing a decline in the services that they actually do see. And I think that's like a big tension with this department a little bit. And Herb has his hand up, and it's not I'm just trying to I guess like talk about attention openly. I'm not trying to like make a critique, if that.
Yeah, I think the point needs to be made. I'm not asking for anything extra. I'd like to be made whole to what we had in the past. That's all I'm saying. I don't think I'm asking for anything extra. If we had 2 seasonal workers in the past, one for the buildings and grounds, one for highway, and we don't have them now, it'd be nice if I could put one body out there to try to make up for that labor shortage. So I'm not asking for anything extra in labor. No, in my opinion.
Okay.
Herb, you had a comment?
Yeah, I'm hoping this is helpful to your question, Roger, and that, you know, in part, last year, the board did include a new laborer, full-time laborer into the Department of Public Works position. So we, as you know, with COVID, we weren't able to fill that this particular year. And as a result, we did use some of that money to help fund the making the finance assistant full-time. So we sort of stole from Peter to pay Paul. That remains in the budget for this year operationally, that person. So hopefully we can fill that position, which will help to backfill some of those particular points. More to your question, Roger, is I think that we are trying to pull together some of those surveys and updated inventories that I think allows the Public Works Director, my office, to help in creating those visuals, for lack of a better term, that the general public at large can understand. So in part of the detail thing, the updated culvert inventory that you received, that's a good example of showing that we have, say, over 800 culverts throughout town. And it's wonderful that we replaced 30, but that's still, you know, that we've replaced a ton because of 2 storms, and we continue to upsize and replace where we need to. But those kinds of things can be provided and shown measurably in a visual sense for, I think, what you're looking at that is helpful in defending with the public, say at town meeting, as to where the direction of the public works can be. And that's sort of some of that strategic direction you're looking for from my office. And some of those inventories do need to be updated, such as the sidewalks, the bridges that Larry mentioned up front. So piece of that is not in place today. We're looking to do that. And so I would say there's a partial answer right now to be able to give you those easy detail pieces that can be turned into the visual answer. It helps to resolve issue that you may not see a culvert, but you can see over time in a picture how many culverts have been replaced or what are in the poor conditions that need to be replaced. Is that more to your question?
Yeah, and I think, and I'll say this and then I'll step back because I don't want to belabor this point and I don't want to, I feel like I'm belaboring the point. It's, I think I'm hearing from the presentations today, I want to be made whole like I used to be. I want the level of services that I had before this board made these cuts to these designated funds. And it's not like the members of our public had a tax decrease in those years, right? And so, we have to we have to make the argument about, have this very conversation in the way that we're supposed to. But, that point is still out there. Taxes never decrease at the time that we made these cuts. And so seeing 16% increase to return to the level of services is a conversation. And I think we all need to be in on that a little bit, especially when people are saying like, I don't see my side of my lawn mowed. So like that adds to it, or why do we need a fire truck if, part of it is Mary has inspired me in the past by sort of playing this role of devil's advocate. So maybe I'm just in that mood tonight, but I think like these are we have to like get at these tensions in this kind of, with this kind of budget proposal. So I'll step back now and I won't make that point.
Perhaps like some other towns have, for instance, budget hearings as part of the process. So for instance, you would go through the process that you're going through right now, have some discussions, but in and among those discussions, literally have, say, a couple public hearings that relate to the budget. So if there's an individual that has a problem that their roadside wasn't mowed or something, that they could come in and ask those particular questions. So they might be able to get some real-time answers from that and allows for additional exposure or transparency to the voters as a whole. Just a thought.
Mary. Mary? Who? Mary?
Yeah, it's sort of a question about a small part of the budget. I noticed that there's some money in the budget for crack sealing again, and I had thought last year that it was stated that, Larry, that you didn't think it was necessary. So am I understanding both what happened last year and what's happening this year? Like I had thought there was a benefit to crack sealing that had been a practice for a long time. And then I think we didn't do it for at least a year. So just wanted your perspective on that.
Yeah.
Crack sealing of the roads.
Okay. Well, last year and this year were kind of aberrations. Last year we had a winter and that kind of put a self-imposed moratorium on things because we had over expenditures that we had to make up for. And so I didn't spend money. And then we ran into this year trying to catch up in the last end of the summer because we had a moratorium because of COVID. So in both of those seasons, we were trying to basically cram a summer's work into a shorter period of time before we had to start getting ready for winter, and winter seasons came on. That doesn't necessarily answer your question, but I guess what I'm saying is when you come to moratoriums and lack of spending or the inability to spend, the first place I would look is crack sealing. And so that's what I did. And so I decided that, well, I can, save some money there and save my budget, or when time gets short and I don't have a lot of time to complete the normal tasks that I do because I wasn't able to spend any money until August 21st this year. That put my entire summer pretty much into a situation where all I could do was labor intensive issues, but not buy things. And so what I did was I just tried to do the basics, and I really didn't have time to contract out those kind of issues.
So I guess I think that answer means that it is a long term, it is beneficial for the roads to do that crack sealing, but it had to be a lower priority because of the weather and because of, budgetary restraints, and then because of the virus. Is that what you'd say?
I would say that crack sealing is beneficial based on the subgrade that you have in the road. If you have a wet area and those subgrades that are poor soils, my experience has been that if you have crack sealing, about 2 years later, you'll see a crack come up right beside where you sealed it. However, there are places in Norwich where we probably could apply that crack sealing and probably do some good. So yeah, I'm not saying that we should never do any crack sealing in town. It was just that there were a lot of outside influences in the last 2 years, which I would think Herb would agree with, that made things a little difficult as far as spending and also getting certain work done.
The other piece, Larry, sorry to interrupt, is Mary, was that what you mentioned was in the past too, Larry, was that, and I think is what Mary's getting at, is that as a standard, we used to do the seal cracking every single year throughout the entire town. And Larry's point, I think it was a year or so ago, was that you don't need to do seal cracking everywhere, every single year, that it's appropriate to do, but in the select areas that really need it. So Larry's point was that he was more selective in doing crack sealing than the previous road foreman.
Okay, thank you. That's helpful.
Any other select board comments? No, I have a few. I noticed that you had something about needing to order 21 road signs. Why, I guess.
There again, because I'm the only person in the Public Works Department that has to do numerous things. Before I had my administrative assistant, I had a lot of road signs that accumulated over the summer that we needed to order a private sign, we needed to order a dead end sign, we needed to order a street sign, we needed to order whatever. And so 21 of them have accumulated, and I have since sent out that request to 2 firms for bids, and I haven't got any response back. But when I had time, I went out and made an order for those signs. Does that answer your question?
I'm just wondering why we need the signs.
Oh, well, some of them are street signs, street names. Some of them are private street names. Some of them are, this is a dead end, not a through road. This is not a maintained road. Some of them are simply, speed signs, signs for trails, signs for,
and these are being
parking lot, whatever,
replacements because the other ones are damaged or gone.
They damaged or gone, mostly gone. People like to steal signs for some reason.
Okay.
And that's not typical that's not atypical to this town. That's pretty much universal.
Yeah. Okay. Then I had a couple of questions. I saw that the Tigertown culvert $94,000 expense was listed in 2 places, both in the bridge designated fund. I think it was designated fund bridges, and in the grant.
In the grants, yeah, right.
So it looks to me like there were 2 appropriations for $94,000 for Tigertown Road culverts.
Well, I guess that's my error, because it's my understanding that if you don't identify these things that you need to apply for these grants and put these monies away, I need to convey that information to the board.
and it could be I was just misunderstanding, and I think John has his hand up, so is, John, are you?
Yes, similar. I had a similar question. So I just, and I seem to remember that we ask this question every year. Yeah, so like lines 456 through 63, there are all these grant things, like the paving grant, right? Isn't that double counting what we've got in 468 for the designated fund for paving?
Well, it's my understanding, and it's maybe it's not accurate. My understanding is that I have to identify these projects that we can apply for grants so that we know how much that we may get for our share of grant funding back. That's
Yeah, but
I guess I just don't understand why grants shows up here as an expense.
Yeah, ditto. Same for 132 box culvert.
Yeah, it's trying to show.
It's the local
you
share.
may not get that.
Well, yeah, with the culvert, it's maybe just the local piece.
Right.
That is not the case in the paving grant, though.
It's supposed to be the local share. I'll go through with Larry. I'll recheck these, John, and
Qualify
Claudia,
the
just
local
to make
share.
sure.
Yeah, because if they really were double counted, that's going to be saving us
Yeah, Oku bucks.
huge chunk of change.
Yep.
Okay.
Sorry about that. We'll check that.
Yeah. What I was trying to accomplish was to show you that we needed to, this is potentially what we get, but a local share would be our share, this amount,
Yeah, and some of them
and that should definitely be there. Yep.
Yeah, some of them were definitely like that, but then another sorry, I've kind of lost my place to myself. Under culverts contracted services, there's a request for 39,000, assuming that 6. I'm not sure if that's the engineering piece of it or the actual replacement.
That's the actual replacement. No, actually what I did is I went out and got estimates from several different contractors on what it would take I actually listed 6 different culverts that we've got to do. And I said, would you give me prices on these for budgetary purposes, not a bid, but for budgetary purposes. And that's basically the rough average of what it would cost us to replace those culverts. And I just assumed 6. I can't guarantee we're going to do 6 every year. We might do 3, we might do 7, but I just said, well, maybe we'll just assume 5 or 6 a year. That seemed reasonable given that we've got quite a few culverts to do.
Okay, and then, under contracted services for bridges, there's an inventory for the bridges and culverts for 57,000. So if we don't, I guess it's
well, the culverts that we're talking about that I got estimates for in the contracted services are anywhere from 15 inches in diameter to 36 inches in diameter. The parameter that I gave the engineer, I gave Stantec for an estimate for that number for 57,000. And I said, any culvert over 5 feet in width, I would like you to look at it because that might turn into a box culvert or something like that. And so that study only addresses every structure in town that's greater in hydraulic flow area of 5 foot width and larger. But the contracted services would be for any culvert for say 15 inches in diameter, 18 inches, 24 inches, 30 inches, 36, and the culverts range in sizes through town. A typical culvert would probably be an 18-inch culvert for the town. So it's a size difference. One is the actual replacement of the contract of the culvert, and the other one is studying them and creating an inventory and determining a priority of repair of these larger culverts.
Okay. And then this is just a very slight aside. In the garage supplies, there's equipment in there for the administrative assistant. That's, to me, has already been purchased. So we're going to be in this fiscal year. So why would it be included in the next one?
Well, it may have been an oversight on my part, but if we have an administrative assistant I know the office supplies are gonna, we're gonna use more paper, ink, toner, computer services, those type of things,
Yeah, then
But if
some
you
of
were-
it was computer, desk,
If
etc.
you were referring to the hardware and those kinds of things, if I put that in, that's my fault. Sorry.
Oh, and I had one other and it completely just blew through my mind. So I guess at this point, since I can't remember what it was,
You could email me, Claudette.
if I could remember, I would email you.
Well, you can email me tomorrow is what I'm saying.
Yeah, well, that factors in that I need to remember what it was. So I can't right now. So any other board questions? Any other comments, questions from the public? Herb has his hand up.
Just very quickly so that people know for the public that the Structures Grant Program was not a grant program that was funded this year for the current fiscal year that we're in, which ends June 30 coming up. What the legislature did instead was they took the monies that they knew that they would have, this is all due to COVID, that they knew that the monies that they had, and what they're doing is they're throwing it into the general transportation aid program. And based on our linear lengths of class 1, class 2, class 3 roads, and this is true for every community, they're going to use that same formulation with I think it was $7 million, and it's getting spread to all the communities in the state of Vermont. So the best guess that I have is that we'll get, I call it a windfall, but is that we'll probably get like $45,000 extra of transportation aid on our revenue side. Right now, I don't have that budgeted in, but I think I provided a spreadsheet or an email in the past with regard to that. I just wanted to make sure that that money will come in. We can basically use it for anything transportation related. But Claudette, that may be, $40,000 that can get thrown at the 132 bridge or box culvert or something along those lines. So we'll continue to monitor that. Larry may have some updated information, but it was about 45, I think.
Yeah, I was reviewing that tonight. I believe the caveat to that, though, maybe I misread it, was that it has to be used before July 1st, 21.
Yeah, it's 20, right, correct.
It has to be applied to a highway before, so it's like the current budget year.
Right. So it's the current budget year, but from now until June 30, that we have to use it for a highway related thing.
So if we need it for sand,
that's the question. If whatever we can use for transportation aid, we can probably use it for that. And then subject to COVID, the VTrans sees the structures application process firing up again normally, which is when you see the applications come in from Larry, that would be for the paving and the paving and the structures grant programs in that March-April timeframe. So obviously Larry will do the applications as applicable, but I just wanted to make sure you are aware that we do have some funding coming that was unanticipated.
Mary, you had a question?
Yes, Larry, if you could talk a little bit about tree removal. I'm noticing it says DPW removed 45 trees, and it seems like there are many more trees. Also that, at the cost, 45 trees at $500 per tree is like $22,000. So are the trees being removed, for instance, when there's a storm and they block the road? Or are they trees that are about to fall over? And what is your assessment of the tree situation?
Well, I apologize, Mary. Sometimes for brevity and lack of time, I don't necessarily put it down in the specificity I should. I contract out trees that need to be taken down that are in some sort of hazard to personal property or the wires or something like that. Those are the ones I contract out. The ones that I refer to, the 45 trees, are a totally different case. Those are the ones that are taken down by the highway crew. One of the things that I've been amazed about since I've been here is the number of trees that we are required to take down. I don't think people know how many trees the highway department addresses on a yearly basis. And so what I decided to do after experiencing a year and a half of it, was we're going to start keeping a log. And so that log, at the time that I wrote that, showed that the highway crew had addressed 45 trees in the period of, I think, of the middle of July to the middle of October. So you're looking at, maybe 200, 250 trees in a year's time that are blown down by storms or fall over due to moisture or hurricanes or whatever. And we take care of those. But there's a separate tree, the tree removal line item is for me to purchase and contract out tree removal. And that tree removal is always the ones that we can't handle for liability reasons. Either we don't have the equipment, we need a climber, it's going to go into the wires, it's near somebody's house, those kind of things. And so those are the ones I contract out. And thus far, I think I've done about 8 or 10 this year. So there's
Okay.
2 separate tree programs, one which I handle myself, which
I
I
see.
contract out, and then there's the ones that the crew picks up almost on a daily basis.
Okay, thanks, Larry.
I remembered my question. And then I promise this will actually 2 questions. And instead of, I'm just thinking that instead of a laborer with salary benefits, if we went to, if we went to 2 part-time or 1 part-time laborer for summer, how much of the gap would that fill?
Well, I thought about that when I was proposing the laborer. One of the things that there's going to be a constant workload for the laborer. He's going to be assisting the highway department in the summer. He's going to be doing basically assisting the highway department and working at buildings and grounds. So that would be a seasonal worker. But in the winter, we really do need people to back up when my crew is, sick and those kind of things. We need help mechanic wise because things break down. We need somebody to go get a part ASAP at emergencies. We need custodial help when the custodian's on vacation and my guy's out plowing. We need somebody to run the sidewalk tractor plow when all my crew is out plowing, because right now we have to plow and then take a guy off the plow route, to go do the sidewalk. So there are a lot of instances where we actually need that help during the year-round basis. Transfer station, we have vacancies up there. We need to have somebody to fill in. So besides the fact that there's quite a bit of work to do, I think it would be year-round. It wouldn't be just on a seasonal basis.
Okay. Then my final question, and I promise it's my final question. Instead of purchasing a new tanker truck, can't we just take the tank off the old truck, trash the old truck, sell the old truck, and put it on one of the 3 trucks that we just purchased?
No, the 25,000 isn't to buy a new tanker truck. It's strictly to just buy a used cabin chassis. I don't think you can buy a truck for 25,000 new. We've actually looked at trying to put the current tanker on a number of different vehicles like dump trucks, maybe a fire truck, those kind of things. But Sonny's looked at it in detail, and a lot of the tank that we have right now extends out too far. And so you would be pulling the weight off your front wheels. But what I'm proposing is having a capital reserve fund to buy a second-hand truck, not a new truck, and then take the tank truck off from our 1981, take the tank off of that truck and put it on that cabin chassis. So I'm not proposing to buy a new truck.
No, I misspoke. I knew it wasn't a new truck, but I was just wondering, putting the tank on an existing piece of equipment.
Yeah. But the 3 that we're buying, or the 3 that we have, those are lesser. They're 1 tons. They're too small. You know what I mean? They couldn't carry it.
Okay, and I lied. I have one more question. Have we received those new trucks?
Pardon?
Have we received those?
No.
Why not? How come? Oh, sorry, I shouldn't say why not. Just
COVID.
wondering why.
COVID probably. I got a build date of December 7th and a delivery date of the end of December.
Wow. Okay. That's it for me. I promise that's it for me. If I have more, I'll bring them up next week.
I'm happy to answer questions. Believe me, it doesn't bother me to try to increase and I apologize for some of the misunderstandings that you've had. You've asked good questions, and I obviously didn't put it down in the right verbiage. Apologize for that.
Rob has his hand up, Claudette.
Who does?
Rob, our Rob.
Rob. Go ahead.
Yeah, the mower you're talking about replacing or getting, what's that item cost?
Well, we looked at 3 different mowers from 3 different manufacturers this year. We actually tried them out, and we were told that maybe 12.5 would be an appropriate number for a bid for the mower, and then we would want to put a bagger on the back of it or some sort to trap the mowings, because we're going to address leaves and those kind of things for the school, et cetera, et cetera. So we would want some sort of a bagger assembly on the back. So 12.5 plus another $2,000, 15 another $2,000. So I put 15,000 in there. I was told on the slide that 12.5 might get a machine that we wanted.
Have you considered electric
mower?
Yeah.
A riding mower?
Yeah, commercial grade electric riding mowers.
We've considered diesel, we've considered, and we considered gas, but I didn't know they have electric riding mowers.
Yeah, I have some materials from last year I could forward to you. They have some limitations because they charge overnight, but.
Right, are they an industrial in nature where you could use them every day?
Yes.
Okay.
And the cost of the total cost of running it over 5 years is lower than petroleum products.
Rechargeable battery type thing?
Yeah.
Oh, that sounds good. Yeah, why not?
Try and get you the information. Thank you.
Please.
Any further questions? If not, I want to thank Larry, and I think we need a well-deserved break right now.
Yeah.
So 10 minutes. Back at 8:37. All of our select board members back, Roger, Rob, John, Mary, and myself, clearly. Herb, our town manager, is back, and not sure about how many members of the public are back, but their faces, their whatevers are still on the screen. And Miranda's back after that nice little break. That I really hope we got on tape. Darn. Okay. So next item on our agenda are the budget next steps and the agenda for December 9th. Herb has typically sent us, and I think we have it, the spreadsheet so that we can make our own allocations to the budget. So
Yeah.
all of us collectively should have that done before the 9th meeting. And to actually, it would be too late for the packet if we haven't done it yet, which is unfortunate. And I know I haven't done mine yet. So Herb, that would leave us at probably, if we can get it done over the weekend, revising the packet for the 9th.
Sure.
Does that sound reasonable to board members? I hate sending out revised packets, but John?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, related to that, I think there's already been a couple of changes that have been made since the template we originally got. So if we could get a copy of the latest and greatest from you, Herb, of what you maybe double check that thing we talked about with the public works, make sure we're not double counting with the way that we're describing the grants.
Right.
I
Yeah,
think
you
that'd
have-
be helpful.
You have all the updated stuff that I sent out today, subject to, obviously, there's a couple things that came up tonight, like you just mentioned, John, about just double checking things, but I did send the updated sheet, and it has the columns in it for each board member as well. But it was just this
I
morning.
maybe didn't see that today. So it's a new version of the main template thing that has our
Right.
4 columns.
It's the version that I had the pink boxes on last night. That's the latest version. And I sent that this morning. There should have been there was 3 files that I sent in one email this morning.
Okay.
And if someone checks their box tonight and let me know if I didn't get any undeliverable messages back. So if I need to send it again, let me know.
Okay, so the board will submit their comments on that spreadsheet in time for Miranda to send out a revised packet.
I mean, gosh, so you're thinking you're going to send out 5 versions of that massive spreadsheet?
No, it should be just one version with everybody's comments on it.
Right, like every year you send me,
right.
your thing, and then I'll put it in. Yep. And then just to compliment, sorry, I don't mean to interrupt, Madam Chair, but with relation to that master spreadsheet that I sent out this morning, the purpose of doing that was to follow up to have for the upcoming packet, because remember last night I said those graphs and everything that we talked about I would have in the packet. So the actual spreadsheet that you would be putting your numbers in would be the actual spreadsheet that's going to go out in the packet for the public. So in other words, you'll have the same spreadsheet that the public will be seeing that you're responding to, subject to that $94,000 and other little checks. But so I just want to make sure that you understand that there will be a consistency of which spreadsheet everybody's looking at the same meeting. It'll be the same spreadsheet.
Mary, you had a question?
She's a mute. You're mute, Mary. Mute, Mary.
Muted, Mary.
Unmute.
I'm sorry. Just not clear on when we have to have this done. Is it Monday?
We need to have it done in Miranda's hand Monday morning.
Monday morning.
Right, Miranda?
Okay.
And I asked about rank ordering for board members to rank order the capital requests for fiscal year 22. If we could do that as well.
So can I ask another process question?
Yeah.
Maybe. Okay. So what are we building together here? You know, I guess, so we're gonna go through this line by line. We'll do our individual columns and then we'll have that conversation
on Wednesday.
On Wednesday. So, okay. So like, I think, so I'm wondering if we say, so a general consensus might be something like, yes, town manager, we understand the need and justifications for these increases, but this is a global pandemic, so 16% is like not the right time. So we're not comfortable with anything more than 4.5%. So together as a board, that will keep that number in the back of our minds as we go through the budget. We don't have to have that directive, but I think I just, it's like it's a process thing. Are we sort of building for the shared vision together, or are we just sort of going based on our 1/5 opinion, and then we'll have that conversation later? And
well,
that's out of turn.
Kind of okay, John, you first.
Well, I mean, I'll probably write a board budget memo like I have before. So that's sort of my attempt to, sort of tell people what I'm thinking about. If that helps to coalesce people around a sort of vision, that's great. If other people want to do similar things to to go in that direction, I think. But I don't think we can just like say, okay, our intention is to build a consensus and then not do anything to do that. I think it requires actual building if that's the goal.
Makes sense to me. If that makes sense to everybody else, everybody kind of, and Roger, I think part of it is like, back in August, I think it was, maybe September, when I had asked the board to try to set some budget guidance.
Yeah.
In light of COVID and the pandemic and everything, my take at that meeting was that there was no agreement, or there was no support in providing that budget guidance. So I think we need to come to some kind of individual sense of and where we want to see this increase. And I like John's idea of the budget memo. I'll probably be submitting my own. And hopefully we can come to some kind of consensus and agreement on a budget.
Okay.
Okay. Make sense to everybody? All right.
Herb has his hand up.
Sure, Herb, go ahead. You just muted yourself. Okay,
Yeah,
there
I
you
just
go.
saw that. It's like, good thing I wasn't pulling a Miranda. So the first of all, we were texting offline. Miranda doesn't know it because she also forgot to bring her cell phone home with her tonight, so she's missing all of tonight's humor. But she has taken over the #1 spot in staff funnies, including passing jokes about unicorns, jokes about pigs that were saved by Narcan, and also with our police chief's wrestling of a cow. So just let you know on that. But I have two things. I would hope that as part of your discussion, even if you can't in your own mind on your 1/5 insight in there, that you still have some question marks or whatever. To me, that is, from my standpoint, that's okay, because I've asked that all department heads attend the meetings as we come up, so that as you get into the discussion and where you may have some question marks, and this is where my statement earlier and in my original email was that if there's a discussion that we can have with you as department heads to help you in answering some of those questions, that's the purpose. From our standpoint, recognizing that there's a lot of dollar increases in there. So if you can't complete the whole thing, I would still complete what you can, so you can see where your consensus, at least operationally, is coming out with remaining questions. And then on the capital budget side, I know that Langus had asked to see if I could put together some kind of a similar sort of form or format that individual board members could go at. I can't figure out how to do that as easily as with the operational budget, but I would suggest that when you're thinking about priority of projects or what have you, not just a ranking of the projects, but if you can even look at the projects over the 5 to 6 year time frame and say, I think it's kind of like, no, this doesn't work for us, or this is okay in the year, or this is okay, but maybe in a different year. So that's sort of the little twist to the rank order that Claudette talked about. And the value to that is that, as a, for instance, with the fire engine type stuff, they have built their designated fund request now and for the future to get to where they're at. If that's too much, so as a, for instance, if you move the ladder truck out 2 years, that could potentially either reduce the amount of designated funds on an annual basis because you're spreading it out over another couple of years, or at least it allows for a different quality of perception in terms of, not perception, but of how much money is needed to get the same piece of equipment. Is that making sense?
Yeah.
Okay. So that would be just, if you had input back, if you made comment on the capital budget side of stuff, it would kind of be specific to which project either you'd like to see moved, taken out, or whatever your reorganization is for the rank ordering. That really helps in terms of establishing the priorities overall, and will help to build consensus.
Okay.
Thanks.
Is that clear for the rest of the board?
Clear. It seems daunting, but yes.
Yeah. And then the Finance Committee input. December 9th is probably really pushing it for them. I don't know if the Finance Committee feels that they can provide some input in the budget and what they see on that date.
We do have that memo from them, right?
Sorry, John, what?
We do have that memo they provided us already as an initial bit of analysis for us. Set of questions.
I don't think
That was in yesterday's packet.
Oh, okay.
There's been so much.
There's so much material. It's confusing.
But Manu is here, and I think he was going to comment.
I think Pam had some words she wanted to share. I'm not sure she's still on the call.
Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Manu, Pam is here still.
Okay.
Yeah, the town budget group did meet and submitted, I guess, 2 full pages of questions, and just things that we would love to hear your answers to at some point during this process. And we have asked for additional information that hasn't been forthcoming. Hopefully those questions can be answered soon. And then we might have additional questions or input. But the Finance Committee as a whole has not met to come up with any kind of a final recommendation. That's something we'll do in the future, I'm sure.
If I may add to that.
Sure.
So our process, what we did, just to remind everyone, was we broke up into 2 groups. Pam, Linda, and they've been spending time looking at the town budget, and the other part of the committee is looking at the school budget. So our process is that the groups then will report to the Finance Committee, so we can have an overall view of the financial impact on the total tax collection. And then our plan is to provide the select board with our preliminary opinion. But I'm perfectly aware that at the speed that the select board is moving, that may be difficult for us to match. And so what I would suggest we do, we wanted to, of course, wait until we could hear these presentations that we've all been listening to, right? We need to now take that away and do our own analysis. I gotta be honest, given the timeline you're working under in going ahead and each select board member giving an opinion on each of the numbers, it feels like it's moving faster than what the committee can provide for you to be able to do that.
Would a report from the Finance Committee, the first meeting of January, be sufficient? We don't need to vote on the budget until, I believe it's the second meeting of January.
Yeah, and our understanding was that was the overall timeframe. You know, obviously, I'm not talking about us needing another month. I'm talking about, you know, potentially trying to, we would like to meet early next week and be able to start building a consensus. You also need to be aware that, we're not all of one opinion, right? So we do need to kind of share our thoughts on what's going on as well, as you are doing right now. And so I think at this point tonight, I mean, we've all listened to the reasons behind, we got to take that away and work through that request as well, just like you're doing yourselves, right? And so I think all I can say at this point is we'll work as fast as we can to match your timeline and provide our opinion over the next week or so. And then that's not just one-time opinion. As new information keeps being shared, as Pam said, we're waiting for some information to come back to us. Then we can continue updating. This is a fluid process, right?
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And so one thing I do want to say in terms of, if I may give my personal opinion, and I'm not, again, talking on behalf of the committee, is that as we go through these discussions, while the percentages in certain, and what I'm about to say, I'm aware is fairly self-evident, but I think there's a tendency sometimes for people to be shocked by big percentages, but percentages, a dollar that turns into 2 is 100% jump. That doesn't really tell you much, right? So as we all go through this process, at least that's how we're approaching it in the finance committees, to really be looking at the dollar change, and not only over the last budget, but also going back a year or two. And I think one of the major things that, if I may summarize sort of the overall situation here, is we are trying to plug a big hole that was created over the last 2 years. And now we're hit with a pandemic as well. And all of that makes this a more difficult analysis, not only for all of you, but also for us, right? And so I think that's important in terms of discussing, $300 increase here and there, while philosophically, I think, and this is again, my personal opinion, may be important for purposes of creating a budget. It may not be the best use of time for people to focus on those small numbers as well, right? So, but that's all I can say. Going back to giving our opinion on behalf of the committee, we got to take all of this away like you are now and do our work as well.
John?
So I'm a little bit sensitive to the dilemma here that the finance committee is set up to advise us, right? But they're not set up to give us, right, the strategy, right, the vision, the policy direction, right? We're supposed to be giving that to them. So we've kind of given them a difficult ask of, can you give us a report without telling them what we want them to report on? So, I think it's important for us to think about those sort of fundamental motivations that we each have. For example, right, maybe what would the advice be if it looks like the federal Congress is not going to give any state and local government stimulus, right? If we should know that probably by early January, if the prospects for that are bleak. So how does that change what we're thinking about the next 12 to 24 months of town funding? On the other hand, what does it change if we think that that is going to happen and that we could possibly be able to benefit from a significant amount of grant money, right? Where would we want to prioritize putting that? And what are the sort of values that underpin that sort of question? Do we want to continue funding the climate mitigation fund, right? A little bit each year, so that continues to grow as something that's available to us to take advantage of opportunities, but also to meet challenges as and when they arrive, right? So if we can have some discrete sort of value infused questions, I think that and, you know, Manu, Pam, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that that would probably be helpful to them to get some sort of direction on what we want advice about. Not just to say, yeah, we think this budget's great, or we don't think this budget's very good, but how would you budget it differently given X, Y, and Z priorities and values? I think on the other hand, what is in a very different category is that, you know, the members of the finance committee have some finance expertise that none of us on the board have. So if there are specific sort of real financy sort of things, I think those are very welcome, right? Are we thinking about the accounting of designated funds improperly in some way, right? Or do we not quite get how those things work? That was a problem a couple of years ago. That sort of advice is always, I think, personally to me, very welcome.
And also, you know, the school, like you've mentioned that you've been watching the school budget meetings and can provide that sort of updates and have that bigger picture. I won't be able to do that this weekend in addition to this initial budget prep. So I think knowing that we're expecting a substantial increase, I don't know what's going on, but you know, if you read general news stories, they're shoring up gaps in education spending, and you know, to have what may very well be an increase in school on top of this increase, like, yes, I appreciate the point about percentages, but our community is reactive. So I would like to balance that. And yeah, I have so many thoughts, and I'm just going to step back because, I've communicated too off the cuff this evening, and I appreciate everyone's forbearance, but, you know, part of me wonders if we should be waiting till the 16th and giving more time, but I also know that maybe time is not what we need. So maybe that's something I'll put out there. Do we need to take next week off and come back on the 16th? I'll say that.
Well, Manu.
I would, I think the more time the committee has to process the information and be able to provide advice, the better, of course. If we are going to do a good job in that role, and be able to have the opportunity to complete our charter, right, our charge, and be able to then come back to the select board with our combined thoughts, so that then you can take that into consideration as you continue the process. I would have thought that was going to be the way things were going to be playing out. So I want to support that. If that's possible, then I would very much like that to happen. Any more time we can have as well. Plus, as Pam said, we're still waiting for some additional information, which, there's a bit of the going into the details a bit more perhaps. So that's one point. And the last point I want to make is to John's point about our charge not being about giving an opinion on where the spending should go. This is something that I have personally mentioned on these calls and also at the committee, that we need to be careful not moving into the political arena ourselves. That's not what we've been asked to do, right? And so, like any budget, it will come a point where decisions will have to be made as to what's more important, paving a road or taking care of culverts. That's not in my view, that's not the committee's job to tell you. But on how things should be financed, one thing I did notice was, we're taking for granted this question of let's put money aside so that then we can buy, for example, a truck. And then the question of leasing came up last night, right, about the police cars. That's a basic financial question of, saving versus leasing, that of course we're more than happy to give you our opinion on. But in terms of, it seems like some parts of this budget include those types of decisions that don't necessarily need to be made, right? So that's just an example of something that we could come back to you and say, look, instead of putting money aside for the truck, maybe for the fire truck, maybe another option is to borrow for it. And I know a lot of people are against borrowing as a philosophical approach. From an objective financial point of view, the answer may be different, right? So guidance from you in terms of what we should come back to you with is something that I think would be very helpful, right?
Stabilization of the tax rate is everything. And I this is the last time I will speak out of turn, I promise. But that should be everything for a small municipality like us, so I would say this is not a stabilization. And so I feel like we need to make, some certain decisions to, make that happen.
Please do.
So I don't know, or I mentioned, I appreciate John saying, well, do the work and then have the conversation, but also it helps to have sort of that general thrust, before you do that work.
Trust in what?
Trust. So general goal setting. So,
Oh yeah, please. I've been asking for guidance from the select board.
So I'm asking my colleague, I promise this is the last time I speak out of turn, Madam Chair, if the goal is stabilization of the tax rate, does this proposed budget achieve that goal? And if it doesn't achieve that goal, why? What sort of exemptions, or why are we exempt this year? Particularly a year where we may need to be exempt the other way. And then I think, yes, the history of the July storm is important context. So, so that's sort of where, that's my struggle. It's been my struggle this whole evening that I just put on display for everyone. And so I would like to know a little bit more about how everyone feels about, this goal setting, and then I'm done. So thank you.
John?
Okay, I will play. So my priorities would be stable tax rate, followed closely by continued preparation for climate emergency, and then that would have a few subpoints in it, like prioritizing walkability and bikeability over drivability, prioritizing used vehicles rather than new fossil fuel burning vehicles, possibly reconsidering how our police department is structured versus other parts of the budget that may need more attention as this emergency becomes more and more acute and a larger and larger demand on our budget. How's that?
Thank you. Yes. Who else?
Well, when you talk about stabilization of the tax rate, stabilization to what degree? No wide fluctuations. We're doing a huge increase this year. So is that going to be your new baseline?
I don't think anyone would say that a 16% increase is stable. So that would be a question, though. What sort of band constitutes stability, right? Maybe a 5% either way band is a good goal. Would be sort of the number I'd probably throw out there. If you're going more than 5% a year, you should have a really good reason for that.
And again, I would say if your increase is 5%, then what's your next is your new stabilization a 5% increase every year? I guess you know what I'm asking? I'm not.
Yeah, no, I know what you're asking, but I mean, that's the point of the band, right? So you're not saying that our goal is to increase the budget 5% a year. You're saying that your goal is to be as close to zero every year, with a tolerance for either a 5% increase or a 5% decrease, which we actually did have a small decrease a few years ago, depending on circumstances.
and I could live with that kind of guidance. So, but if that's what our goal is going to be, we've got some serious work to do to get down to 5%. And you know, that's been when I bring us back to the fall, the late summer, early fall. I wanted to provide guidance that said no more than, or you know, within that 0 to 5%.
You are always free to submit your own memo at any time that you would like to.
This was the whole general select board discussion, and I think I did send a memo at that point.
Did, actually, yeah.
So,
Yeah. No memos.
Mary has her hand up. Claudette.
Mary?
It's more of a question in my mind, but just thinking about how, you know, we have all the police cars that need to be replaced at once, and we have our internet technology is really old, and it just seems as though we just sort of fix everything up really well and then sort of drift away from it for a few days rather than thinking rationally about it. And since that is the case, it's really hard to know whether it should be 2%, which is, you know, I have heard bandied about since I've been on the board. You should try to keep it around 2%, but I don't even know what that 2% is based on. And also there should be some point where if you're taking care of things, it should flatten out, I would think, if you can figure it out. It should stabilize into some kind of rate, but I don't know how to figure that out myself. I really don't. It's very confusing.
Well,
and I'm also
I mean,
thinking, wait a minute, just thinking, I'm just a little bit concerned that our infrastructure is like, we have ideas about what to do. Let's build a new sidewalk, which I think has huge benefits, but then let's sort of kind of ignore all the other sidewalks that at some point need either maintaining or replacing, and kind of losing track of that. So I'm frustrated with how we do all of that. And I don't know what I will be able to say to address that, but that's kind of my frustration. I'm done.
John?
I think that's a useful thing about the version, the sort of sorting of the budget that Herb sent us, that sort of sorted it into big sort of buckets. Like,
yeah.
I don't think that 2% is actually very realistic, because you think about our budget, right? And the percentage of our budget, which is humanity, right? And so if you say that our budget is going to be 2%, then you're basically saying that those people are going to get annual raises that are less than the cost of living increase, less than you would expect them to get for increasing their experience and their usefulness and all of the things that come along with longevity of service and things like that. So, you know, you need to think about, I think, a little bit about what sort of organization we are. So some organizations are, you know, like on one extreme, you would have something like I do, like a solar field, right? Where you spend a ton of money right at the beginning, and then you just sort of ride that capital investment into the sunset and very little changes. And then at the opposite end, you have either businesses sort of like what Rob does in the IT sector, where things are also very capital intensive, but they become obsolete super fast. So you have to constantly be reinvesting that. Or you have people, and people, unless we have a sort of very different philosophy, which is, you know, sort of let's turn over our workforce every 5 years, and so that we continually bring in lower rung paid people, then right, you're gonna sort of have an almost inertia of probably somewhere between 3 and 5%, just because so much of our budget is people, health insurance, especially. And that's really what the biggest part of what drives our school budget, I think, as well.
I was shocked too, just at the amount that was for contracted services. I'm going to have to take a look at that. I thought, I don't know if any of the rest of you feel that way, but I thought, is there any way to work with that number?
Well, I think it's a problematic number because it's a lot like a miscellaneous bucket. It's too hard to hide sins in there, I think. So I'd really like that to be removed as an accounting function and have that broken into what those services actually are. And distributed amongst the various budgets so that we know what those, because that's a very large number.
And I thought, you know, first I thought, well, legal, but then the listers, you know, engineering. But I would like to have that more broken out and understand it better, because I thought it was unacceptably high. I mean, maybe it's just realistic, but I don't know. It's hard to say.
So Roger, does that answer some of your question?
Yeah, I think this is helpful for me. I really value everyone's thoughts and individual contributions, and I think it's this way where we like form a cohesion. Like we don't have to, like, you know, 100% agree on where we arrive, but I think like knowing a little bit about the process like is important to me. I mean, I appreciate too like John's bravery, maybe shouldn't be bravery, but it's bravery to say like what his budget goals and where his values are as a member. And so I just want to quickly do that myself a little bit. I think, no, I'm not spending anything this year on any cars, any fleet related things until there is a green fleet policy on the books. So I don't know if that necessarily includes this fire truck that we've talked extensively about, but until we have clear, consistent policies on our values around green fleets, like I can't approve anything this year unless there is a strong case being made. So anything that's like equipment-y or about fleets, I want kind of on hold until there is a policy in place. That is maybe new information, Herb, and I apologize, but it's become really clear to me in this process that we are inconsistent with our direction on that. So that's one thing that I want to put out.
Roger, can you clarify? Does that mean that if the police car is completely not working, we don't buy one?
For this year, the answer is no, because we do not have a policy on the books, and I'm tired of like doing this piecemeal. You know, Rob had, he gave a great contribution about these battery powered vehicles. I want to know more about that. A member of the public talked about biodiesel. Like, you know, all of this needs to be brought into a policy, and then our staff needs to do that work. And so then we have we'll have a clear, better understanding about how to purchase vehicles as a result of the research process that we put forth in a policy. So I am not not for me, no. So that's one thing I wanted to be clear at. And so I think being clear helps, and I will take the hit if people are upset with me. The other thing that I want to say is, John has his hand up, so should I step back?
I was just going to jump in there because I think you can, and I'm fully behind that. I'm fully behind spending that, but I think you can separate that spend from the fund.
Okay.
And I think that, you know, and Herb, I'm impressed with your sort of hanging back and letting us have this discussion.
I know. Thank God.
I know you'll have some stuff to chime in here in a minute, but I'm guessing that Herb would say, great, if you want to wait to buy the fire truck until you've got an electric fire truck or whatever, but can you keep funding for it in the meantime? And I think that's where I am. Like, I'm happy to, try to get back onto the track of, more or less the funding levels we were at. But I also fully support that idea of waiting to pull the trigger on anything. Certainly a long life vehicle. Pam Smith and I actually had a forbidden little chat about that very point about, is there a used truck option? Is there, any of these other things that Doug or Rob brought up that we can do other than a 25-year life diesel spewing giant fire truck?
Go ahead.
Yeah. So,
yeah.
Okay, I'm going to bring us back.
So Rob has his hand up, and I still.
Sorry, Rob, you haven't had a chance to speak, so please do.
So the one question I have for my fellow board members is, over the last 2 years since the big flood, how much do you feel in the goal of keeping a more stable tax rate? How far behind has the town gotten in its expenditures for different projects and so on? Did we consciously say, no, we can't do that this year, even though it seems like a good idea? And so how many of those chickens are sort of fluttering around waiting to come to roost that we really need to consider as sort of a remedial hit at some point to get back on track?
I mean, I would say roughly $500,000, right? So we got the big meal working through the snake, right? And so we're gradually working out that $500,000 that unfortunately was by and large wasted money, right? It was money like fixing stuff that mostly already worked. And that's an awful thing to have to spend money on. Some of it was well spent, and we to steal someone's slogan, we rebuilt a little better than we were before it washed away. But to a large extent, we paid to replace stuff that was already good. So that sucks, and we're sort of having to work that off. And $500,000, that's 10% of our budget. So
there's another 500,000, which was what we underfunded our designated funds for 2 years.
I think that's the same 500, isn't it?
Well, I guess that's right, because we had to.
I think we underfunded that because partly we knew the 500 was coming.
Yeah.
And we wanted to make sure that it was only 500 because
yes,
we didn't want to count that FEMA money until it was actually sitting in the bank account.
No, that's a very good point. But that's a kind of a big chunk, you know, that adds to our issues. I just wish we could smooth it out somehow. And I don't know, I'm going to get into those worksheets, and I know I'm going to get distracted by this and that. And I don't know if I can, and I think I will do a memo just to say what I could do if I had the ability to go through those worksheets and express what I think should be done. Because I mean, I'll take a stab at it, but I don't think it's going to express what I think should be done.
What do you think should be done, Mary?
Well, okay, and I don't know if it can be done. Okay, that's the other thing. But I just think we're down about $500,000. You can see that from what we took out of the designated fund. And we had to spend that on the roads and so forth and on the damage. But somehow I think we have to put it back in. I think we have to put it back in just for basic designated fund health. And I think, you know, I think it's been pretty steady. If you look at that graph that, you know, Herb came up with, we were really doing pretty well. And that there are other things like climate that I think will be a little more costly, but that are essential. But we're not even getting up to just the basics very easily, you know, because that's a big jump to have to deal with. And I think it's going to be very hard for the public to swallow, especially if they're going to have a 9% school increase and then a 16% town increase. I don't think that's going to be very much appreciated. So if there was some way to spread those out a little bit, I would like that, but I don't quite see how to do that. There's some puzzle pieces that have to move around and think about.
John, before I go back to you, Rob, did that answer your?
Yeah.
More to ask.
Well, I just wonder, I worry that if we don't address that shortfall with some expeditiousness, it's going to compound, and it's going to end up that, you know, that 550,000 that we're behind will all of a sudden be 800,000 behind, and then climb forward because things are being ignored that become much more expensive if they're not addressed expeditiously.
Right.
So that's the challenge, is to figure out what in here in the budget is going to be cheaper for us to try and hit sooner than later.
Right.
That the cost over 10 years will be less, significantly enough less, that it's worth asking for a little pain up front.
And John, and then Manu, and I know you had your hand up too.
And Pam Smith as well.
So one thing that hasn't been brought up yet, and we've sort of alluded to it as a possibility in this conversation, is, so again, so we've, Herb, correct me if I'm wrong, but we've paid off the note that we borrowed to pay for the storm, correct? When the FEMA came in, we paid that off. So one thing we could do is we could go to the voters at town meeting and say, this big event happened, right? We wanted to make sure that we were stable as that went through, and it is now over. And it is fully, taken care of and paid for. As a result, we have a hole in our long-term capital spending. And so we're proposing that we fill that hole with a 10-year bond now in the amount of $550,000. Our interest rate now is probably below 2%, I would guess, as a municipality, right? There has never been a better time to borrow money. And so that would be the way that we spread this now over, and we look at it and we say, look, this was a not off the books like shady, but this was an out of the budget event that was out of our control that we had to deal with. And so we propose that we deal with that over a 10-year period, right? The downside, the risk of that, again, going back to my constant issue, is we have to think about the fact that there's maybe another storm, like anytime, right? So this could happen again. And so that would argue more in terms of, once you know what that cost is, you should really just sort of suck it up and pay for it, because you don't know when the next one's coming. But that definitely goes against that stable tax rate. So the best way to deal with that storm and keep the stable tax rate would be to propose like a 10-year note that amortizes that $500,000 over a decade. And, maybe we make it 600 and we start building another designated fund that's for, weather-related emergency, right? And we start building that up for the future, if we think that that's going to become more common. But I do think it's worth thinking about, and that would maybe be something very discreet, very, very specific to ask the finance committee to consider. Do you think that it's a smarter way to deal with the designated funds to do a debt piece, rather than just trying to figure out in the next 2 or 3 years how to take care of it in the regular budget?
Would you all, I got a question for you guys. Would you all want to just carry a lower undesignated fund and ask the voters if they'd like to use, what's left?
Another option, yeah.
200,000 chunk this year or 200,000 next year, something like that. I'm just throwing it out there.
Good idea as well. What's our percentage at the moment? The undesignated fund is a percentage of budget? What?
19%.
Okay, so that's definitely at the high end of our range.
Yeah, and I figured we had 171. This was rough calculation based on what I had at the time. 171,000. That would bring us down to, I think I calculated it was either 15 or 16%.
Yeah.
If we went
So the
slightly
difference was 171,000. That was kind of like out there.
Isn't our band like 12 to 16% is what we like to stay within?
I think it was 12 to 20.
I mean, gosh, I almost think that that's like a no-brainer to use, to bring that down to like 15%.
Use a big chunk. Yep. Maybe even make it 200,000, increase it a little bit. And I think things like, the sheds at the DPW that separate the materials, I think that's probably annoying, but I wouldn't go there. And even the building for the plastics and all that. It seems like there's some things that could be stripped out. that if you had enough of them, might add up to another 100,000.
Yeah, I mean, I think the difficulty with this budget is the majority of the increases are in DPW, and that is the department that I have the least understanding of personally. And I appreciate the availability of our staff, but I don't necessarily learn a set of priorities coming out of these presentations from those presentations. And so like that is also a struggle. And so so I think like the biggest thing that we need to swallow is those increases in the department, but that is not that's something I know the least about, or so anyway, I think what I'm saying. So I think we do need to have more time understanding some of those increases, not to necessarily scrutinize it, but to I think like understand, or at least like someone sort of present the I need more from somebody on that. Maybe Herb, maybe you can help with that. But
Well, and the other thing is talk about bonding. Why? It just blows I'm appalled that for $275,000 we only get 1 mile of paving. That just drives me.
Well,
and should we bundle up some and bond for a couple of projects at once versus designated fund?
I don't think that number's right, is it, Herb?
Just Claudette, that's reclamation, not just paving. So that's taking the big machine that brings it down.
Okay.
Well, so it's not, so sorry to interrupt, but that just to clarify that one.
I think we might want to push that project out a little bit. Also the 132 project out. And then the other thing that makes this very difficult is Tracy Hall. And significant needs. And then I think our internet, our internet scenario to me is dire.
Well,
And
I think we committed as a board to support the internet.
I know we did. I'm just saying that the pieces are large.
Yeah.
Our deficit is large. Our town hall need is large.
But where else could that, that to me, what I was thinking is that $171,000 that I don't want to say is like the difference between 16 and 19% of an undesignated fund. That might be a good method of
Starting to
paying for the IT stuff.
Except I'd go lower. I'd go below 16.
Yeah, so it was just a starting point for me, but.
So I think we have some tools, but we just have to be very careful about, it's the time and the money. It's like when you do it and it's how much money and how you figure out the little building blocks. So,
Yeah.
and I know, I almost want little shapes I can move around rather than the worksheets, but.
So I'm gonna swing back to Manu and then Pam and then board. We have to decide on Manu's suggestion on holding off the further budget discussion until the 16th and just doing essential work on the 9th minus the budget stuff.
I like it.
I'm going to yield to Pam. She's been waiting to speak for a while.
Okay, go ahead, Pam.
Thank you, Manu, and thank you, Claudette. As you guys are talking, I have a lot of thoughts that are coming into my mind. The first one is the timing of this process. If you guys are right up against the deadline and you've got Thanksgiving, you've got Christmas, you've got New Year's, this budget process should probably start much earlier than October.
I've been saying that for a long time.
Time to act on that, Mary. I really feel that, this is just too rushed at the end and you're not feeling comfortable with, the time you have to make decisions, and they're hard decisions. Talking about adding to the debt load. The auditor last night said, be very careful about, getting in that $3 to $4 million debt load, which is about 50% of your assets. If you've got the Tracy Hall project coming up, You know, do you want to add another $500,000, $600,000 to your debt load before you even know what Tracy Hall will cost?
Well,
And talking about capital projects, I was impressed with the way that the fire chief presented his capital program. He had, you know, where are we now? What do we need to add? What are we going to spend on this year? And it just flowed like a cash flow chart. Then the year-end number jumped to the beginning of the next year, and it just flowed nicely. I think every department should be doing that for their capital expenditures. You know, where are you now? What do you need? And where does that put you at the end of the year? And then that's your starting point for the next year. And the other thing is when they're looking at what do they need, if they need a new fire truck, have they looked at leasing versus buying? Have they looked at used versus new? If you need a new car and you don't have $50,000 in the bank, maybe you want to go out and get a lease. And in 3 years, get rid of that gas-powered car, and maybe you'll be in a position to lease an electric vehicle. You know, the green fleet thing, I agree. We've got to really focus in on how do we get there. And we don't get there by buying 20-year vehicles that we're stuck with when the green fleet vehicles are available to us, but we can't buy them because we got stuck with this, you know, this long-term expense. So those are my thoughts as I listen to you guys talking of all the considerations and just my ideas of what I think can be added to those discussions.
Thank you, Pam.
Thank you for listening.
So what about the original proposal next week, or not the original proposal, but the proposal to shift next week's meeting to just everything except for the budget? Because there are a few things that I think we
Need to deal with.
that are time sensitive.
Yeah. How about we try to do memos to the best of our ability next week, and then get into the actual exercise in the following week, so that way it'll act as sort of a summary of some of the things that we have said here. And then I, like Pam, have so many more thoughts, which I will put into writing. So maybe, I know we'll have to do it in a weekend, but I'll try to aim for that, perhaps.
I like
I like
that.
that idea.
I like that.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
So we're committing to the 16th as a meeting day,
Right.
Or-
Budget only.
budget only, unless there's absolutely something that is absolutely,
There's not, because there's not a regular meeting then.
Okay.
So
okay,
someone should have thought of that before.
budget only on the 16th. So
Okay.
Herb, I think you can defer your department heads from next week to the 16th. Second,
Were you looking out the window forlorningly, Herb? Are you there?
Oh, I keep looking over at the calendar.
Oh, okay.
is everybody okay with that approach?
Yeah, and then the worksheets would be due the Monday of the week of
The worksheets will be due by next Thursday
Okay, worksheets.
in
due-
time for the packet.
Okay. All
Okay,
right. Yep,
are we good?
yes.
Can we adjourn?
I move we adjourn.
Second, third,
Motion made by Mary to adjourn, seconded by Rob. Roll call, Roger,
Yes.
John,
Yes.
Mary,
Yeah.
yes.
and before I say yes, I just want to thank everybody, because I think this was probably one of our most important meetings. So, and I'm a yes, so thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Watch for the
See ya.
snow.
Thank you.
See you.